This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Abby Lucas.
We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of creativity.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
On each episode, we examine the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
We aren't. Find us online at artofdarkpod.com, and please support the show through Patreon or Substack. You get extra stuff. Thank you. We are back with another episode of Art of Darkness. It is a core episode, a hotly anticipated core episode with chocolate sticky fingers and blueberry dreams. I'm back with Abby Lucas. Abby is manning or womaning this
Personing.
Humaning. And I personally welcome this core episode. I love riding shotgun, and it has been a time here in the United States of America. We don't have to go into it. These episodes are meant to be evergreen, and so we'll just focus on our subject for today, who is
Roald Dahl.
Roald Dahl. Roald Dahl. I'm really excited. So Abby, I guess, ask me the question.
Kevin, what do you know about Roald Dahl?
I know Willy Wonka, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, English. I understand that they're English-ish. I know that he Matilda. I think he's had a kind of an outsized influence on the culture relative to maybe like the way Americans think about him. I know he's like huge in the Commonwealth. I mean, obviously, Americans love. I grew up with, the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. That was a perennial film we would just watch over and over and over. But I can't say that I've read much of him, although we're reading one of his books for book club. And then, of course, what seems to keep happening again and again and again, accusations of, like outright anti-Semitism. It comes up, and I think that there was some controversy around maybe them rewriting some of his material.
Yeah.
And that is about what I know. Cool?
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I discovered in reading about him that I really did not know anything. I mean, I knew all of the books because I grew up reading these books. They had a big influence on my life, but I didn't know much, if anything, about him as a person. And, you think children's book author, because that's what he's known for, right? He did not get around to doing any children's book authoring, as we will discover, until perhaps his late 30s, early 40s. So there is hope for all of us.
Listen, I mean, you're not done until you're in the ground. So you could write your last great poem on your deathbed.
Yeah, well, so all the like genius things that we know him for really didn't happen until quite later in his life.
All right.
The last 30 years or so. But that does not mean that the previous 40 years were not eventful, because they were very eventful.
Well, and what do you have prepared for the patrons on the After Dark?
So for the patrons on the After Dark, we have Hollywood Dames in Espionage, The Glamorous Life, of an assistant air attaché. So after World War II, Roald Dahl spent some time in the US of A, possibly as a spy. We got another spy here.
What? 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 Why is everybody a spy?
Everybody's a spy.
Everybody's a spy. Okay. Well, that's very enticing. So, of course,
Yeah,
patreon.com/art of dark pod, substack.com/at art of dark pod. We appreciate all our patrons. But, if you can't support the pod materially, just tell people about the show. I know we have like 80 core episodes now. And of course, the great Brad Kelly, and then now Abby. I mean, there's so much material, and it's a lot of it. I mean,
a lot.
most of it is free. So enjoy Art of Darkness. And Abby, I think we're ready to rock. Are you
Cool.
ready to
Okay.
rock?
I
Okay.
am. Yes, I am. I am concerned this is going to be a long one, mostly because the main source material that I used, aside from my own memories of the art that this man has created, is a biography called Storyteller. It's by Donald Stark, and as you can see,
Oh no! It's a
that
door
is a hefty
stopper.
book,
Oh
and
my gosh!
100 pages of this book alone are just bibliography and index.
Let me say too that this show could not exist if it weren't for the biographers, and we poach a lot of material. I mean, that's what we do
They,
is we
yes,
poach
yeah.
material from. I mean,
Donald
we
Stark, if you are out
uh,
there, thank you. I have poached a lot of material from you.
and listen, and you're welcome to come on the pod and do a dark room. We love talking to biographers, and of course, we're not biographers. We are. This is a profiling podcast. We are profiling Roald Dahl. What a strange name too. Roll,
Rolled. It's Norwegian.
rolled.
Yeah.
It's Norwegian.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay,
That's going to come up a lot.
all right, okay, cool.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, very, very detailed biography. Donald Stark knew Roald Dahl in the sort of final days of his life. He was working for the BBC, and he had gone to do a program about Roald Dahl and went down to visit him and his wife. And ended up being a family friend. And Roald had, I think, asked one of his daughters to do his biography, but his daughter was overwhelmed by just the amount of information and I mean, I guess her own father's death as well, and asked
Yeah.
Donald to do it, and he did it with great diligence. There's a lot of sources, a lot of like interviews with people from his life. It's a very detailed biography. So I don't know how many years of his life that took, but well done.
I mean, how many pages is it?
It's six
It's
hundred
like
and something.
600. Okay. All right. Great.
Yeah,
Cool.
650 something.
Well, I cannot
Yeah.
wait. We're going to get into it. It's going to be great. And then, of course, again, we'll do the After Dark for the patrons and talk about the spycraft, apparently.
Spycraft,
Why is
yeah.
everyone a spy?
Artist spy. I'm just
I,
waiting for someone to tap me on the shoulder. When is it going to be
really?
my spy time?
That's right. That's right. That might be the show title. This might be the episode title is Roald Dahl Spy Time. Very good. Very good.
Anyway, okay, let's get into it. All right, Roald Dahl, the celebrated storyteller of childhood wonder, would almost certainly despise this podcast. He once told his biographer, Donald Stark, that biographies were dull things because even the most extraordinary artists were, beneath it all, ordinary. But Dahl himself was no ordinary man. He was contrarian, subversive, and lived a life shadowed by tragedy, riddled with scandal, and laced with intrigue. For someone who claimed to want nothing more than to tend his garden and entertain children, his story is anything but boring. He was a literary and literal giant whose influence still looms large today in books, musicals, and cinema. There is something in the Dahl family that feels cursed, and if one were inclined to be superstitious, perhaps it all begins in Roald's maternal line. It was Whit Sunday in 1822 in the tiny Norwegian. Yeah.
What is Whit Sunday?
Whitsunday is it's some sort of religious celebration.
Yeah, well, let me look it up. We'll look it
You
up.
have a look for what
Yeah, I'll have a look. Yeah,
as the
yeah, yeah.
resident
As the resident
non-religious person.
Catholic, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I should know
I'm
what
not
Whit
entirely
Sunday
sure
is.
what Wits. I know
We,
it's a series of islands off the coast of
it's a
Australia.
Christian feast day commemorating the descent of the Holy Spirit. Okay, well, there you go. Whit Sunday.
Okay. So
Okay.
it was Whitsunday in 1822 in the tiny Norwegian hamlet of Gru, and the local church caught fire during a packed service. The sexton, dozing beside the candle lighting fire, failed to notice until it was too late. Flames spread quickly through the wooden tar-lined building, and when the packed congregation tried to escape, the inward opening doors trapped them inside. Within minutes, the church was an inferno. More than 100 people perished, making it the deadliest fire in Norway's history. Amongst the survivors was Pastor Ivar Hesselberg, who escaped by stacking Bibles to reach a high window and leaping through the glass. Although some
What?
found
What? Go, okay, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Although some found this action selfish, many across Europe celebrated his quick thinking as the mark of a modern rational man. He went on to become a philanthropist, theologian, and member of parliament, helping to introduce the law requiring public doors to be opened outwards. His son, Hans Theodor, squandered his inheritance through drink and gambling, eventually dying in poverty. His descendants, however, rose into Norway's growing middle class. One of them, Sophie Magdalene, would marry and move to Wales, and in 1916 gave birth to her only son, Roald Dahl.
So he's Norwegian by way of Wales.
Yeah, he's well. I'm about to go into it, but he's
Okay,
Norwegian on
yeah.
both sides of his family. So,
Okay. So
but
Nor
a
right.
lot of Welsh, a lot of Norwegian immigrants to Wales around the
But
1800s, apparently.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
I
neither did I.
you're always learning things on Art of Darkness. I mean,
Yeah,
that's kind of what it is. I mean, it's like an infotainment podcast. I mean,
yeah.
that's kind of what we are.
I mean, the
Yeah,
climate's probably not that different, and it's
sure.
a little closer to other ports than Norway.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some mining going on.
Right. Yeah. Right. Probably some work. Yeah. Some
Yeah,
jobs and
some
yeah.
work.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some mining going on. Yeah. True. Yeah. And the greatest flag in the world.
Oh yeah, it's a pretty cool flag.
It is the greatest flag in the world. I mean, for a nation. I mean, that the dragon flag is just wicked cool.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. Okay.
Roald's father was also Norwegian. Harold was born illegitimate in 1863. His parents wouldn't marry until 6 months after his birth. In a small town like Sarpsborg, that stigma would have been impossible to ignore and may have fueled his determination to build a new life elsewhere. He
Mm.
had a harsh childhood. In one of his loose autobiographies called Boy, Roald describes how at 14, Harold fell off a roof, broke his arm, and then had it brutally misdiagnosed as a dislocated shoulder by a drunken doctor who called in two passers-by to help wrench it back into place. The bone splintered through the skin, and the arm eventually had to be amputated. Roald
Oh,
tells the story with his usual dark relish, describing how his father sharpened a prong of his fork so he could eat one-handed, and managed everything except cutting the top off a boiled egg. It's a suspiciously neat tale. Later, Roald admitted to his American editor, Stephen Roxburgh, that he had invented parts of it, particularly the sharpened fork detail. Photographs confirm Harold's arm really was amputated, though the truth may have been less dramatic, perhaps a drunken parent, not a drunken doctor.
mm.
Whatever the truth, Harold grew into a thoughtful, ambitious man with a taste for beauty, nothing like his rough butcher father who gambled away money on horse races. With his brother Oscar, he left Norway in the 1880s, as Roald later wrote. My father was a year or two older than his brother Oscar, and but they were exceptionally close, and soon after they left school, they went for a long walk together to plan their future. They decided that a small town like Sarpsborg was in a small country like Norway was no place to make a fortune. So what they must do, they agreed, was to go away to one of the big countries, either to England or France, where opportunities to make good would be boundless. The brothers spent time in Paris before Harold eventually settled in South Wales, where he had married a Parisian beauty who he presumably had met in Paris, Marie Boraine Gracia, in the summer of 1901. Shortly after the
Paris is
new,
probably a good place to go pick up a wife.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
you're
sure.
probably
A
gonna get
lot
a
of
pretty wife in Paris,
sure, I
well
think
dressed,
so. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. And and
cultured.
there's a lot of people, that they seem to make their way through Paris. I mean, Paris was. I
Hmm.
mean, obviously, it's a huge city, but in any case, it comes up a lot on the pod.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Just like World War II.
Yes, this is another World War II story. Yeah.
Fun.
It's another one, a different aspect of World War II, as they all have been. But
Mm.
yeah,
Hmm.
I think I've seen enough of World War II from many different sides.
Hmm. Yep.
Anyway, shortly after the newlyweds returned to Cardiff, Harold went into business with another expatriate Norwegian 3 years younger than he was, named Ludvig Adnsen. Over the next
Nailed
two
it.
decades,
Nailed it.
nailed it.
Yep.
Norwegian names I'm going to be messing up
Hmm.
today, and
Hmm.
hopefully not too many Welsh words. I have tried to put the pronunciation of them next to them in my outline, but the Welsh ones are hard. It's going to be even harder than French.
Yeah, yeah. Welsh is just, I mean, very long words. Isn't there there's that one city in Wales that has like the longest, it's just like this, like,
It
it's like
is the
40. Yeah.
is the second longest place name in the world. The
Hmm.
longest place name in the world is in New Zealand.
And what is that?
I'm not going to say it off the top of my head because
You just could do some
I'd have to
improv. It's
I'd have to see it written down. I can say it. I just would have to see it written down.
okay. Well, you know what? You know what? We're gonna do that on the After Dark.
I'm gonna tell you the longest place name.
We're gonna do that in the After Dark. Don't forget. Okay? That'll be fun.
I'm not going to attempt the Welsh one though, because there are just
No.
some
No, no, no.
things, some sounds in there that I no.
Yep. Sure.
Yeah.
Beautiful language.
Beautiful language. Beautiful
Yeah.
language. And
Yeah.
they brought it back from the brink.
And God bless them. And one of my favorite bands is Welsh Manic Street Preachers.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, the Manics. Let's go. The Holy Bible. One of the best albums ever made.
Was it the singer of the Manic Street Preachers that went to oh, what's the town? And he disappeared? Like,
It wasn't the singer, it was Richie Edwards. It was the lyricist. And
oh,
I'm gonna do Richie Edwards at some
Coventry.
point. He
Yeah.
disappeared right after the Holy Bible, I think right before they were going to tour the United States, and they never broke in America, which is crazy because you're able to see them when they tour here in like really small venues, and then
Hmm.
over there they play like the O2. I mean, they're just like massive, but
Well,
they're
it became
incredible.
it became a saying, like going to Coventry was that you would just like be forgotten about because like
Right,
you
right.
went Covent like no one goes to Coventry. So like it's just this little place and like
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
it's like where did he go? And it just turned out he was in Coventry.
I mean, listen, and they're one of the greatest bands of all time. They rock. I mean, they're just incredible. And his lyrics are, of course, famous. He's sort of there. He's sort of your Kurt Cobain, a little
Hmm.
bit. Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Okay.
that was a little detour.
Little detour. Welsh. All right. Over the next 2 decades, the shipbroking firm of Adninson and Dahl, which supplied the ships that arrived in the docks with fuel and a host of other items, would expand from its small room in Boot Street to acquire offices in Newport, Swansea, and Port Talbot, as well as large premises in Cardiff, which at one point also housed the Norwegian consulate. Gradually, the partnership began to trade in coal as well as simply supplying ships, and both men became rich. Harold's marriage to Marie began promisingly. He rented an arts and crafts seafront house near the docks in Barry, where they had Ellen Marguerite in 1903 and a son Louis in 1906. On October the 16th, 1907, while heavily pregnant with their third child, Marie died. She was 29 years old. Her death certificate indicates that she collapsed and died of a massive hemorrhage caused by placenta previa. Marie's granddaughter, Bryony, however, remembers a rumor whispered in the family, perhaps stemming from Roald's mother, Sophie Magdalene, that Marie had been depressed and died from a failed abortion. While it is
Oh,
possible that an attempt to terminate the pregnancy artificially may produce similar symptoms to placenta previa hemorrhage, the risks for the abortionist if the pregnancy was advanced would have been enormous. So unless Marie had attempted somehow to do it herself, the official version seems a good deal more plausible. Marie's death left Harold devastated. He had almost completed building a splendid new whitewashed house for his family, far from the commotion and noise of the docks in leafy Llantlef, a medieval town that the railway had made a suburb of Cardiff. Harold had designed many of the building's new details himself and proudly named his new home Villa Marie in honor of his young wife. Sadly, she never saw it finished. Instead, at 44, Harold found himself suddenly on his own, left to raise two tiny children aged 3 and 1, neither of whom would ever remember the dusky, wide-eyed waif whose beauty had so bewitched Harold. Following Marie's death, her mother Ganu came over from Paris to help look after Ellen and Louis. 4 years passed. Then one summer, Harold went away to visit his sister Olga, who was now living in Denmark. Whether he was lonely and went consciously in search of a new bride, as Roald maintained in his memoir Boy, is uncertain, but it was in Denmark, not Norway, as Roald later claimed, that the Dahls and the Hesselbergs finally connected. Sophia Magdalene Hesselberg, who was visiting friends, had strong, almost masculine features that were in sharp contrast to Marie's delicate, almost doll-like appearance. Within a matter of weeks, she and Harold were engaged. It was a convenient match for both of them. She was 26 years old, sturdy, strong-willed, and eager to break the tie with her parents. He was prosperous, established, and old enough to have been her father. Returning to Villa Marie, Sophie
age gap.
Magdalene.
Age gap.
Age gap, yeah.
Age gap. That was called an age
Yes.
gap. Yeah.
Yeah.
How many years
Yeah.
are we
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
here? Are they like 20 plus
He's
years?
40, 44, and she's,
18,
yeah,
18
44,
years?
and she's 20 something, 20, late 20s.
Math. Math. Okay.
Nothing. Yeah. Age gap. Yeah.
Age gap.
Age
Yeah.
gap. No, not really.
It was
She's got the prefrontal cortex, so she's not.
right.
It's not really
From
grooming
25. Of
age
course.
gap,
Yeah.
but,
No, of course. I mean,
but
right. Yeah. And of
age
course
gap.
it was, looked upon differently, then
Yeah.
and so
And
forth.
she was like, "Get me the hell out of Denmark."
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Many such cases.
And maybe these days, though, you might be
Well,
like, "Oh, maybe let's go to Denmark."
Yeah. I mean, yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. Get me to Denmark.
Yeah, live a nice, quiet life in the
Hmm.
overcastness. I don't know. I've never been to Denmark. I've heard it's pretty though.
I'm sure it's lovely. And I'm sure we have
sure it's
listeners
lovely.
in Denmark. And of course,
Yeah.
we-
Hi.
hello. Beautiful country. Beautiful country. We'd love to hear from you. artofdarkpod@gmail.com.
Returning to Villa Marie, Sophie Magdalene immediately took charge in a manner that was both decisive and somewhat brutal. She turfed the beloved Ganu out of the house and hired a Norwegian nanny, Birgit, to look after the children. This alienated Ellen and completely traumatized the 5-year-old Louis, for whom Ganu had become a surrogate mother. No longer was French to be spoken at home. From now on, only Norwegian and English was permitted. Within 5 years, Sophie
What a downgrade.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man.
And like a completely different set of sounds for your I mean I guess those children were already half Norwegian, so maybe they already spoke Norwegian, but
Sure.
no more will you speak French, which is probably what they spoke more of if they're at home with their grandmother.
And I just want to jump in and say this is one of the your this is Art of Darkness, and you just the beat after beat, it's just like a fairy tale of just like brutality and church fires and abortions and broken amputations and oh my god, and age gap. And I mean, it's just like if you've got the bingo card, I mean, you're just already bingo. It's just
Oh,
crazy.
well, just you
What a
wait.
Oh wow, what a story. Incredible.
Within 5 years, Sophie Magdalene had given birth to four children: Astrid in 1912, Elfhild in 1914, Roald in 1916, and Elsie in 1917.
So Roald Dahl
Astrid,
was born in 1916.
1916, and the
1916.
the only boy and the third child, second
Got it.
from youngest.
Understood.
Astrid was Harold's favorite. This is the oldest daughter. A snapshot of him roaring with delight as his 1-year-old daughter takes a puff from his pipe is the only photograph to survive that shows him with anything but a sober, almost somber countenance. Roald was named after the Norwegian explorer Amundsen, who had successfully reached the South Pole in 1911. He was his mother's pride and joy, her only boy, and therefore treated with special care. His siblings affectionately dubbed him the apple of the eye. Harold sold Villa Marie in 1917 and bought T. Miniv, T. Miniv, a large Victorian farmhouse at Rhader, further out of Cardiff, a few stops down the Taff Railway. It had 150 acres of land, its own electricity generator, a laundry, and a collection of farm outbuildings that included a working piggery. Roald later recalled with nostalgia its grand lawns and terraces, its numerous servants, and the surrounding fields filled with shire horses, hay wagons, pigs, chickens, and milking cows. The purchase of the farm even merited an article in the local press, which described Mr. Dahl as a man with many years' association with the shipping trade of South Wales and prominent in dock circles. His firm is a very large business, the article concluded, especially with Norwegian ship owners whose vessels have continued to trade with the district all through the war. Harold bought paintings and antique furniture for the new house and carved wooden picture frames. He collected alpine plants, going out in all weathers to stock the new garden with what he had collected. At one point, he also bought his young wife a second-hand Dion Bouton car and tried to persuade her to take up driving. It was a mistake. On her way to visit a friend who had just had a baby, she put her foot on the accelerator instead of the brake and crashed the car into a cartload of eggs. When she finally got to her friend's house, she found out that the baby had died. She never drove again. Two things that probably didn't have actual impact on one another, but
So
yeah, I'm
he
not getting in that car again.
rich kid, rich kid,
Rich kid. Yeah.
very rich.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that like farm rich.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
pastoral, 150 acres, piggery, rich.
Hmm.
Yeah.
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 At home, Harold was not the easiest of husbands. He could be withdrawn and undemonstrative, sometimes almost cold, as he absorbed himself in his many private interests. As 1920 dawned, business was booming. Though he had started his family late, when he was 40, he was now in his mid-50s and had 6 happy, healthy, multilingual children around him. 2 were already at boarding school, the older French ones. If he did not see his younger children as much as he would have liked, he still occasionally found time to relax and unwind with them, chasing a giggling Elfhild round the dining room table, for example, while singing Grieg's troll dance at the top of his voice. Now Sophie was pregnant again. Everything seemed idyllic. But at the beginning of February, Astrid, Sophie's eldest daughter, awoke in the middle of the night with a fair stomachache. Her younger sister, Elfhild, who shared a room with her, went to fetch her mother, complaining that Astrid's cries of pain were keeping her awake. A doctor was summoned, and Astrid was diagnosed with acute appendicitis. The doctor operated at home on the scrubbed nursery table, but by then it was too late. The appendix had burst, and Astrid had peritonitis. She never came round from the anesthetic. About a week later, she died from the infection. She was 7 years old.
Lord.
Yeah.
Uh, life is brutal now in a different way.
Hmm. In a
Uh, but
different
l-
way. Yeah.
but life is like sort of more psychologically brutal now.
Hmm.
But back then, you would die of appendicitis, outside the piggery. I mean, and at 7.
At
I
7.
mean,
Yeah.
it was just horrible. I mean, in any case, I mean, this is just you're just playing all the hits here. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. I was looking forward to this as a kind
And
of a
we're only
relief.
4 pages in.
Um, and I was like, "Oh, Roald Dahl. It'll be. But I guess I should have understood that because there's
Yeah,
this
his
deep
children's books are
darkness.
quite dark.
They're very
Yeah.
dark. That's kind of the whole point of
Yeah.
his. Yeah. In any case, yeah.
Harold never recovered from the blow. Astrid was far and away my father's favorite, Roald wrote in Boy. He adored her beyond measure, and her sudden death left him literally speechless for days afterwards. He was so overwhelmed with grief that when he himself went down with pneumonia a month or so afterward, he did not much care whether he lived or died. My father refused to fight. He was thinking, I am quite sure of his. He was thinking, I am quite sure of his beloved daughter, and he was wanting to join her in heaven. So he died. He was 57 years old. Racked with pneumonia, Harold articulated his regrets in his journal, torturing himself for having worked too hard and having not sufficiently enjoyed his dead daughter's brief life. How little we understand about putting a price on the world's many good things. How seldom does the door to our hearts stand wide open. We put the blame on the fact that we have too much to do, that we must have peace and quiet to think and work, and so we shut out the sun. Only when it's too late do we see what we have missed.
Mm.
So, the older sister's died, and so has the father. He was buried in the medieval churchyard of St. John the Baptist in Raether, next to his daughter Astrid, on whose grave the earth was still fresh. Above their joint resting place, Sophie Magdalene erected an elaborate pink granite cross. The funeral was grand and formal. All the children dressed up. Sophie Magdalene never showed her pain. Others wept, but she did not. Much rested on her shoulders. She was 35 years old and had 5 children in her care, a sixth on the way. She intended to concentrate her energies on the living rather than the dead.
Oof.
Yeah.
Oy. At least they have money.
Yeah, well, yeah. We'll get
I
into
mean,
that.
okay. All right. All right. Goodness gracious. Oh, I did not expect this.
Roald would later call Sophie undoubtedly the primary influence on my own life, admiring her crystal clear intellect and deep interest in almost everything under the sun. She was also the first storyteller in his life. Sophie loved weaving fantasies about members of the family interspersed with downright lies. Often her stepchildren bore the brunt of her more malicious tales, but one legend endured for all her children, the story of their father. Roald was only 3 when Harold died, so everything he knew came through his mother, the one-armed survivor who overcame adversity, the Parisian craftsman and lover of beauty, the grieving father who refused to live after Astrid's death. Some of these tales were true, some embroidered, but Sophie cut ties with the wider Dahl family, so her version became unchallenged. For Roald, they hardened into myth. Later in life, he never questioned them. He simply measured other men against his idealized papa. Roald criticized his father for only one thing, leaving an intricate, complex, and controlling will, which suggested a distrust of his wife and which made the family's day-to-day survival much more difficult than was necessary. His plans were predicated on the assumption that Sophie Magdalene would marry again, so the bull of the estate was left in a trust that was constructed more in favor of his children than his wife. But she remained a widow, and the result was that she was left with very little direct control of the family finances. Although she was one of the trustees, Sophie Magdalene still had to get approval from the other 2 trustees, her brother-in-law Oscar and Ludwig Adnanson for almost everything she bought for the household. This was time consuming, and Sophie Magdalene sometimes also found it humiliating. The estate was large. In 1920, it was valued at over £150,000, and in today's terms, its equivalent is around £5 million or $7.5 million.
Yeah.
One might have thought that the income would have been enough for the Dahl family to go on living in Radö, but it was not, and their life as rural landowners was abruptly terminated soon after Asta, Baby, as she became known, was born in the autumn of 1920. By Christmas, the family, with Birgit the nanny and a couple of maids, moved back to Landliff into a pleasant, medium-sized suburban villa called Cumberland Lodge. It was a comfortable existence, if a less grand life than living in Radö. But there were consolations for the young boy. Its principal attraction was a large garden with a swing and some rudimentary cricket nets, where Roald, already a keen sportsman, could practice his batting. Roald entered Landliff Cathedral School in 1923, aged 7. The school, a Georgian building in the shadow of the cathedral, was near the family home, and his mother, Sophie Magdalene, wasn't yet ready to leave Wales. Roald stayed 2 years, but one incident there would echo throughout his life and fiction. It involved three Dahl hallmarks: a sweet shop, a foul old hag, and violent retribution. In Boy, Dahl recalls it with tongue-in-cheek bravado. Truth is more important than modesty, I must tell you. Therefore, that it was I and I alone who had the idea for the great and daring mouse plot. We all have our moments of brilliance and joy, and this was mine. The prank was simple. Roald and his friends slipped a dead mouse into the sweet jar of Mrs. Pratchett, the vile shopkeeper. When she discovered it, she shrieked, dropped the jar, and then ensured the culprits were viciously caned by their headmaster while she egged him on. Dahl paints her as a grotesque villain, a small, skinny old hag with a moustache, goat's legs, small, malignant pig eyes, grimy hands with black fingernails. But when Roald's own turn came, the comedy vanished. It is bad enough when the cane lands on fresh skin, but when it comes down on bruised and wounded flesh, the agony is unbelievable. Sophie Magdalene, furious at the scarlet stripes she found on his body, removed him a term later, but instead of a kinder place, she sent him to St. Peter's Prep School in Weston-super-Mare. St. Peter's was, in Dahl's words, a purely money-making business owned by the headmaster, and in later memory resembled a private lunatic asylum. His friend Douglas Heighton agreed, calling the headmaster a beastly cane-happy monster with a collection of rods. Boys were divided into houses with absurd names: Duckworth butterflies, Duckworth grasshoppers, Crawford butterflies, and Crawford grasshoppers, and competed fiercely for stars or stripes. Dormitories had rows of iron beds with cold basins and bedpans. Young Roald
Ugh.
wrote home complaining about the lack of springs in the mattresses. So homesick, he once faked appendicitis. His family doctor struck a deal with him that he would allow him to stay home for 3 days if he agreed to never fake an illness again. Gradually,
It would make
yeah,
sense that he would fake appendicitis.
yeah,
Yeah, right,
yeah.
right, right. And now
Yeah. He's
now
like,
we're in
I
like
have family knowledge of this.
now we're in
Yeah.
like we're like in boarding school territory, which always makes me feel the ick. Like I
Yeah.
really I don't like
At
it.
like
Yeah, yeah.
primary school age.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You're just ripped from your family and you're put into this totally alien environment, and there are these strange adults who, don't love you at
Yeah.
all. And I mean, this is not an enlightened time. They'll whip your ass if you get out of line. I mean, it's just brutal. Yeah.
I was having a conversation about boarding schools with a friend of mine recently who went to a boarding school. And I was
Hmm.
like, I mean, I don't have kids and I'm not going to, but I was like, I could not imagine sending my children to somewhere where, like, I don't know, like the potential criminality of the people that are going to be looking after them.
Not at like primary school age, not at
Yeah.
elementary school age. I mean, maybe, there are some elite boarding schools, there's a culture of that, it was for high school,
Hmm.
where, they prepare people for the Ivy League and then, to make a lot of money. But that's I think a little different from sending like an 8-year old
Yeah.
away. I mean, just it's
I
really
mean, I don't
a
know how many
horror.
places there are, like in the UK even, that you could send an 8-year-old away to these
Sure,
days.
sure,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think it would be the lawyers would probably have a field day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ugh.
yeah.
Gradually, sport became his solace. Tall and wiry, he played rugby, football, cricket, and boxed. Football being soccer. Though described as overgrown and slow, his letters home brimmed with enthusiasm for his matches. He suffered headaches from growing too quickly, but pressed on. Academically, he struggled, particularly with languages. Reports described him as a little on the defensive and urged him to gain confidence. For a time, he was kept down a year, which restored some self esteem, but he remained a middling student. Outside school, the natural world fascinated him. He collected 172 birds' eggs, from tiny wrens to gulls and crows. Reading also deepened, from Beatrix Potter to Kipling, Dickens, Stevenson's Treasure Island, ghost stories, and Hans Christian Andersen. Uh,
Love all that
Eli-
stuff. All that stuff is
yeah.
just great. Yeah, I read all that stuff. Just love all that stuff. So good.
Um, he memorized cautionary verses by heart, and it left a permanent impression. By 12, Dahl had absorbed Beethoven, Mozart, Shakespeare, Tchaikovsky, and Grieg, along with 3 Dickens novels. Yet St. Peter's also hardened him. After one rugby match, he boasted to his mother, "We got 4 of the chaps crying," a sign that by 1929, he had learned to give as well as take punishment.
We got
In
4 of the
April,
chaps crying. Rocks. Rugby is not, rugby is
rugby is
just
brutal.
brutal. Rugby is serious. Yeah, anyway.
In April 1927, Sophie Magdalen sold Cumberland Lodge and the Dahl family moved to Bexley in Kent. So they're now in England. The spacious new house, Oakwood, was only 15 miles from central London, yet had 2 acres of tree-filled grounds tended by a gardener called Martin, and much to Roald's delight, a hard tennis court. His youngest sibling, Asta, agreed the children didn't have many restrictions and that by English standards were kept on a pretty loose leash. Once Roald sent her up a cedar tree in the garden, absolutely padded out with cushions, so that she could shoot at his 10-year-old sister with an air rifle and see how far the bullets would penetrate. She gleefully consented. On another occasion, he rigged up an elaborate aerial chariot made out of Meccano, containing soup cans of cold water, and suspended it on a long wire so he could bomb local ladies as they walked their dogs along the lane at the bottom of the garden. The result pleased him hugely. The ladies who had halted and looked up on hearing the rushing noise of my chariot overhead caught the cascade of water full in their face. It was tremendous. Dull remembered. In in January 1930, Roald Dahl started at Repton School, a strict and gloomy boarding school in Derbyshire. The school's red brick and buildings were cold and unwelcoming, and discipline was harsh. Roald was placed in the Priory, one of the school's houses. Life there was controlled by older boys called Boses, who were prefects, who had almost total power over the younger students. Each study, a group of boys sharing a room, had a strict hierarchy. Seniors at the top and fags, new boys at the bottom, who acted as servants. Fags had to clean, fetch coal, polish shoes, and even warm toilet seats for the prefects by sitting on them bare-bottomed in the winter.
See,
Abuse was common.
this is what I was gonna say. There's gonna be sexual type abuse. I mean, it's like, ugh. And it's just sort of de
Yeah.
rigueur. It's just expected. Like, yeah, the warming the toilet seats by, I mean, just like how
Yeah.
bizarre.
And I can imagine I mean, British winters can be pretty brutal at the not as brutal as Minnesota, but that we as a country don't seem to either have enough heating or enough air conditioning. So
Oh
I'm
no,
gonna,
your situation is dire. I mean,
yeah,
we're better off here because we sort of have our shit together. But I spent a very very cold winter in England, in an old house there, and we had a leak, and it just took weeks, and then the heat gave out.
yeah,
And then that took weeks to resolve. I mean, it was just really, really tough, really tough.
yeah. I can
No hot
imagine this
water.
place is probably like coal fires and like hot water bottles, maybe if they're lucky at nighttime.
Oh my
So yeah,
Lord. Yeah.
those toilet seats that they were gonna have to warm were probably gonna be
Ugh.
pretty cold.
Jeez. Wow. No wonder his stuff was dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They ruled us by fear, Roald would say. Independence of spirit and wit in the younger boys was stamped on and regarded as side. And being sidey to a bozo was unthinkable. You hardly dared speak to him, let alone be sidey, Roald recounted. Once during my second year when I was 15, I was sidey to a boy called W. Wilson, who was 16. W. Wilson wasn't even a study holder. He was just a second, but he didn't like what I had said, and at once he rounded up half a dozen seconds his own age, and they hunted me down. I ran into the yard where they cornered me and grabbed hold of my arms and legs and carried me bodily back into the house. In the changing room, they held me down while one of them filled a bath brimful of icy cold water, and into this they dropped me, clothes and all, and held me in there for several agonizing minutes. Push his head underwater, cried W. Wilson. That'll teach him to keep his mouth shut. They pushed my head under many times, and I choked and spluttered and half drowned. And when at last they released me and I crawled out of the bath, I didn't have any dry clothes to change into.
Good God.
Uh,
Oh man, why are people
it builds
so?
character.
Oh yeah, right, right. I mean, it's just like you're teaching people that you're you're like less than nothing. You're just
Hmm.
like you're an object of abuse. I
Yeah.
mean, and yeah, well,
And
ugh,
they would have just been like, well, this happened to us. And so now it's going to happen to you.
absolutely, yeah, ugh, just horrific, horrible, like crime. I mean,
Yeah, crime. Yeah.
crime. I mean, the kind of thing that, yeah, horrible, just awful. Mm.
Roald also struggled with health problems, growing pains, chest issues, headaches, and was constantly asking his mother to send medicines. His academic record was poor. A persistent muddler, writing and saying the opposite of what he means, was his English teacher's verdict halfway through his first term. 18 months later, little had changed. His mathematics master is dismissive. He has very little ability and is inclined to be childish. The following year was no better. Dahl is accused of idleness, apathy, and stupidity. He is lethargic, languid, and too pleased with himself. His housemaster also notices a vein of obstinacy in him, which he
He just like me
compliments.
for real. Oh, now I find him very relatable now.
But his pupils' happiness or unhappiness never seems to be an issue. Roald hid his unhappiness, putting on a tough front at school and writing cheerful, funny letters home. Things improved when he befriended Michael Arnold, an older boy who was clever, rebellious, and full of curiosity. They went on adventures together, exploring the countryside and experimenting with wildlife. Roald even smuggled a pet rat into school. Michael became almost like family, visiting Norway and Bexley with the Dahls. Michael Arnold would not survive his full term at Repton, however. The circumstances of Arnold's departure reveal how much Dahl kept from his mother and how much his letters are to some degree early essays in fiction. It all began when Binks brought Arnold, the subversive, into the fold and made him a bozer, with all the powers that entailed. In January 1933, during a devilishly cold spell of weather, Roald told his mother that he and Michael had been out illicitly skating. But he must be careful what he does now, he added, as he's been made a house prefect. Things soon began to go wrong for Arnold. Not that there is any trace of this in Roald's letters home. On May the 7th, he told his mother that he was in Michael's study again this term, regaling her with details about a photograph of a grasshopper he was enlarging and requesting her to send patent leather shoes for a dancing lesson. But the following week, he delivered a bombshell. Do you know what has happened? Michael has had a severe mental breakdown and he has had to go away for the rest of the term before he goes to Oxford. He is staying in a lonely inn up in Westmoreland, all alone and quite and perfect quiet, which is essential for him to have. I don't think he'll mind because he rather enjoys tramping about on the moors alone all day. I've had quite a lot to do arranging all his things, returning his books to the masters from whom he had borrowed them, packing a crate full of his books, and putting everything else in his trunk. I'm very sorry he's gone, but now I go about with Smith, that fellow from Bromley. To show how darned popular he was, half the house is written to him already. After receiving Roald's letter, a sympathetic Sophie Magdalen suggested to her son that she invite Michael to come and stay at Bexley. Roald replied that he thought that this was not a good idea, but did not explain why. Sophie Magdalen, ignoring her son's advice, must then have written to Michael's parents and from them, or from Michael or himself, learned the truth, that Michael had been expelled for homosexual activity with younger boys.
There it is.
There it is.
Inevitable in the boarding school. Yeah, we're just waiting for it. Yep.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Shocked less by Michael's behavior than by the fact that Roald had not been honest with her, she then wrote to her son, accusing him of being a liar and implicating him in what had been going on. In a panic, Roald went to his housemaster for advice. The housemaster explained the situation in a letter to Sophie Magdalen to smooth the situation over. Despite this incident, Roald and Michael stayed close friends for decades until a late falling out in old age. Roald, however, continued to believe that his friend had been badly treated by Repton, not so much because he'd been expelled, but because he had been brutally beaten beforehand. This punishment affected him more deeply than any injury he himself received, perhaps because the beater in this instance was not a bozer, but his headmaster, the boss. By the time he came to write Boy, his memories of that beating surged back with some ferocity. And this was one incident from the initial draft that he did not censor. His final account is almost entirely as he first described it. Michael was ordered to take down his trousers and kneel on the headmaster's sofa with the top half of his body hanging over one end of the sofa, he wrote. In between each tremendous crack administered on the trembling buttocks, the boss would light his pipe and lecture the kneeling boy about sin and wrongdoing. Arnold, Dahl remembered, was subjected to 10 strokes, although Ben Roos recalled that there were 12, 6 with a heavy cane and 6 with a whippy one. At the end of it all, Roald continued, a basin, a sponge, and a small cleaning towel were produced by the headmaster, and the victim was told to wash away the blood before pulling up his trousers. Ben Roos corroborated Dahl's memory of the bloody mopping up operations and added that the beating made a considerable impression on everyone at the school. And although both his sisters Elsie and Asta maintained that the Dahls had been brought up with no religion whatsoever, Roald would later claim that the incident made him begin to have doubts about religion and even about God. In his mind, it was all the more shocking and hypocritical because the perpetrator was Geoffrey Fisher, the man who later on went to be the Archbishop of Canterbury. In defense of Geoffrey Fisher, Roald had made a mistake in this recalling. Not for the first time, he sounded off before he had fully checked his facts. For the culprit was not Fisher at all, but his successor, John Christie. The beating happened in the summer of 1933, a year after Fisher, as Dahl records in his own letters home, had left Repton to become the Bishop of Chester. So in his autobiography, Boy, he had misremembered it as the guy who went on to become the Archbishop of Canterbury, but his letters home actually told a different story.
Okay, but it was a different archbishop?
It was just a different headmaster.
Oh, a different headmaster. Okay, so it was.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. Good God. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna stand up and get myself another soda. No, I am. I'm gonna stand up right now and get another soda. You keep going, Abby. Just keep going.
More than 50 years later, however, Dahl blamed the shoddy bandy-legged Fisher for the caning and had painted him as a sanctimonious hypocrite. I would sit in the dim light of the school chapel and listen to him preaching about the Lamb of God and about mercy and forgiveness and all the rest of it, and my young mind would become totally confused. I knew very well that only the night before this preacher had shown neither forgiveness nor mercy in flogging some small boy who had broken the rules. Roald finished his years at Repton feeling alienated. He was not trusted with responsibility and admitted he didn't like rules or authority. His only relief came from secretly riding his 500cc aerial motorbike, which gave him freedom on the weekends. In 1933, he passed his school certificate exams in several subjects but decided not to go to university. Instead, he longed for adventure abroad. His headmaster's final report summed him up. He has ambition and a real artistic sense. If he can master himself, he will be a leader.
Ah, okay.
So
All right.
that is the end of his school days.
Act one, done. Earlier today, I'm like, oh, this is going to be such a relief from the sort of horrors that have been happening, in our world, right now. And just so much for that. But Brad Kelly and I started a show called Art of Darkness, and here we are. I mean,
What did you expect?
this is just bonkers.
Yeah.
I just crazy. I mean, I'm on his side, obviously, and I
Hmm.
want him to succeed. Uh, it's just like such a crazy thing to think about, but I mean, well, I don't want to get it too far into it, but I just sort of think about like sort of how far we've come, but also maybe not. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of terror right now. I mean, my I'm just gonna say this outright. My wife's childhood school just had a shooting.
Mm.
This is a Annunciation in Minneapolis. Two children were multiple people were shot. Two were killed. One was in critical condition, and then I think the shooter killed themselves. I
Oh
mean,
God.
so it's like sort of. I mean, are we that far away from, you know what I mean? Like how
Mm.
far are we from this? I think we think we're way more advanced. I mean, we're not like
Mm.
whipping children's asses, but we live under this kind of pall of kind of quiet terror.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, and I think we're a little smug about ourselves
Hmm.
now, and I didn't necessarily intend to bring that up on the show, but I mean that really affected us.
Yeah.
I mean, and schools are really vulnerable places. You have
Yeah.
these aggregations of children, and the educators are, they're doing their best, but it's just like, and a lot of abuse still happens in schools. I mean,
Mm.
there are statistics and things. In any case, I don't want to make it about me, but I'm just shocked that he sort of like and that he survived. You sort of survive psychologically, But I can also see why you would retreat into art,
Fiction. Yeah.
into fiction. There's a chocolate factory and blueberry children, and there's a guy named Willy Wonka. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it makes sense in any case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's just not be too smug about ourselves in 2025. Like we're way past this.
There is always room for improvement.
We have a long way to go still.
We do have a long way to go. Um, anyway, Roald Dahl is an adult now. He
Act
survived
two.
childhood. Act two.
Act two.
Act two is a long act.
All right.
Um, In August 1934, Roald joined a public schools exploring society trip to Newfoundland. 20 days hiking and surviving in the wild. It was a taste of adventure that only made him more restless. That September, back in the UK, he began work with Royal Dutch Shell in London, earning £130 a year. The job was dull, commuting from Bexley, pushing papers in the city, and filling weekends with golf, racing, Beethoven on the gramophone, and American crime novels. Office life bored him, and what he wanted was a posting in Africa. It
Ah,
took yeah, it took 4 years before Shell granted his request. One delay was that Roald, the son of Norwegian parents, needed a British passport before he could be sent abroad. In the meantime, life at Oakwood with his mother and sisters was gentle and happy, perhaps the last truly carefree years he would know. His siblings began moving on. Ellen married the pathologist Ashley Miles. Louis married in 1936, and Alfhild and Elsie chased their own paths in London and abroad. His mother, Sophie Magdalene, now arthritic, retreated into her animals and home life, still strong-willed, still clashing with relatives over money and pride. By the time his posting to Africa finally came through in September 1938, Roald had been dating a girl of his own age called Dorothy O'Hara Livesey, whom he had met through Alfhild's future husband, Leslie Hansen. Dolly, as she called herself, was of Belgian-Irish descent and joined Roald's family on the pier side at London docks to wave him goodbye on his trip to East Africa. Look after her, Dennis, said Roald to his friend as he boarded the SS Mantola. Dennis took the advice to heart. Not long afterwards, he got her pregnant, and Dolly became the first Mrs. Dennis Pearl. Um, Roald's own adventure had begun. After 2 weeks on sea on the SS Mantola, he arrived in Mombasa, then traveled down the coast to Dar es Salaam and in uh, Tanganyika, now part of Tanzania. Shell had just opened an oil terminal there, and Roald was the most junior of three staff running it. The work was mostly dull logistics, but he was thrilled to be given charge of aviation fuel for the flying boats that landed in the harbour. He lived in Shell House at Oyster Bay with his colleagues, waited on by African servants. Initially, Dahl enjoyed his power over the natives, but soon became fascinated by the tall and graceful and soft-spoken Midishu, who was from a tribe of magnificent fighters. Midishu traveled everywhere with him, showing absolute loyalty to his young white master. In turn, Roald looked after Midishu, advising him on his finances, teaching him how to read and write, and even acting as his banker when he wanted to save money to buy a wife.
nice.
Yeah,
Wow.
just
Okay,
yeah.
and now we have some severe colonialism now.
So,
Just
yeah, big time
suddenly,
colonialism. Yeah.
yeah, great.
Midishu's innocent loyalty and toughness may have even helped inspire the hero of Dahl's most famous children's book, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. For when Dahl first sketched out the story, he made his young hero a black boy, drawing a little picture of him and describing him as the tiniest 7-year-old that you could ever find anywhere, as bright and clever as any other boy of his age in the town, and as brave as a lion, and as kind and nice and cheerful as anyone you could ever meet. Um, Yet Roald's own letters home were full of casual prejudice. He mocked the Indian clerks, was horrified by their cramped houses, and often fell back on the racist cliches of the day. Later in life, he admitted shame at this, describing his younger self as a ridiculous young Pukka Sahib, swept along by the attitudes of late empire without yet having learned to think for himself. When you're very young, you just swim along with what everyone else is doing, he told an Australian radio interviewer. You can't buck the tide. It was the last days of British Empire. Outside work, he ran the household, played squash and golf at the Whites Only Club, and sent trinkets and gifts home. But the world beyond was darkening. What do we think's happening, Kevin?
I think the painter is rising into power, and the world is preparing for war.
Yep. As he had sailed, Hitler had seized the Sudetenland soon after Chamberlain returned from Munich proclaiming, "Peace for our time." Roald, siding with Churchill, thought Britain had suffered an unmitigated defeat. Repeatedly, he urged his mother to get out of their house in Bexley, which he rightly believed would be directly under the flight path of any German bombers attacking London. He hoped that his mother and sisters would move to their holiday haunt on the Welsh coast in Tenby. There he believed they would be safe. If war breaks out, you have jolly well got to go to Tenby, otherwise you'll be bombed, he wrote. None of you must stay in London. Don't forget, you've got to go if the war breaks out. But Sophie Magdalen was stubborn. She did not want to move, and neither did her daughters, who were enjoying their social life in London too much and had no desire to relocate to the remote Welsh seaside. They elected to stay on, believing that Oakwood's large cellar would make an effective air raid shelter against any attack. Roald was infuriated by his mother's refusal to bend to his logic and repeatedly tried to make her change her mind. But mother and son were as obstinate as each other. By the end of September, the Germans had invaded Poland and Britain was formally at war. In September 1939, with German settlers all around, Roald volunteered as a special constable. He was given a platoon of African soldiers and told to guard the road to Mozambique, arresting any Germans trying to flee. There was like a large German settlement
Sure.
in that part of Africa at the
Sure.
time as well.
Sure.
When
Yeah.
Britain declared war on September the 3rd, his men quickly rounded up fugitives. Dar es Salaam filled with soldiers, but Roald despised the army's pomp and discipline, reminding him too much of school. He joked about inventing an oximeter to measure the amount of bullshit talked and written by the military. He had no desire to join the infantry. Instead, inspired by his pilot friend Alec Noon, Roald made the choice that would change his life. He would join the Royal Air Force and learn to fly. In October 1940, Roald Dahl's war had begun in earnest. He passed his RAF training in Nairobi, despite the challenge of being 5 foot and having to duck behind his Tiger Moth's windscreen just to breathe.
Oh,
Flying over the...
he's 6'5".
Oh, he's tall, tall.
Oh, he's a tall guy.
Yeah.
And I think I knew that he was a pilot, but yeah, that's actually pretty cool.
Hmm.
Hell yeah.
And 5 foot at the time.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, people were tiny.
People were tiny.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Flying over the savannah, scattering giraffes and wildebeest, he felt at one with his aeroplane from the vantage point of a god. But war was different. On the 19th of September 1940, he ferried a Gloucester Gladiator across the desert to join the 80 Squadron. Desperately, he looked for somewhere to land the tiny craft. He skimmed low over the bumpy ground but could find nothing suitable. The sun disappeared behind the horizon, and he knew his time had run out. He must land the plane immediately. He took a chance, throttling back and touching down at about 80 miles per hour, praying the wheels would not strike a rock. But luck was not on his side. The undercarriage hit a boulder and collapsed instantly into a pile of twisted metal and rubber, burying the nose of the plane into the ground. He was thrown violently forward against the front of the canopy. His nose was driven back into his face, his skull was fractured, and he was knocked unconscious.
Oh, God. Wow. Man, I might move to the country. This guy, I mean, he's already lived more life than, a lot
Yeah,
of
and he's
people
only
ever
in his
will.
early 20s at this point, I think.
Oof, incredible. Wow. I mean, and
Mid
it's no small
20s?
it's no small thing to be a pilot.
Hmm.
Even now.
Yeah,
I mean, it takes a great deal of skill, and acumen to
yeah.
be a pilot.
A
Um,
lot of
and
testing and exams
sure,
and
sure. I mean, and
hours flight time.
and I think then, I mean, it must have been even more difficult then. I mean, you think about the aircraft and the technology and everything. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just, yeah,
you're a
really,
6 foot
really,
five guy who can is
right.
probably all squished up. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just wild. Wow, incredible. Go on.
the smell of petrol stirred his consciousness. He tried to open his eyes, but he could see nothing. Moments later, both the gladiators' fuel tanks exploded and the craft itself caught fire. Blinded and numb, Dahl contemplated what seemed to be a certain death. All I wanted was to go gently off to sleep and to hell with the flames, he wrote later. But something forced him to act, to extricate his damaged body from its parachute straps, push open the cockpit canopy, and drop out of it into the sand beneath. His overalls were burning too, but he put out the fire by rolling on the ground. It was not bravery, Dahl later noted, simply a tendency to remain conscious that saved him from being burned to death. All I wanted was to get away from the tremendous heat and rest in peace. The world about me was divided sharply down the middle into two halves. Both these halves were pitch black, but one was scorching hot and the other was not. In terrible pain, Dahl crawled slowly away from the burning wreckage, but he was not yet out of danger. My face hurt most. I slowly put a hand up to feel it, and it was very sticky. My nose didn't seem to be there. I tried to feel my teeth to see if they were still there, but it seemed as though one or two were missing. And then the machine gun started going off. I knew right away what it was. There were about 50 rounds of ammunition left in each of my 8 guns, and without thinking, I had crawled away from the fire out in front of the machine, but they were going off in the heat. I could hear them hitting the sand and stones all around, but I didn't feel like getting up and moving right then, so I dozed off. Thankfully, all the bullets missed him. Later that night, 3 infantrymen from the Suffolk Regiment, who had seen the plane come down some 2 miles west of their base in Mercer Matra, went out to inspect the wreckage and found the injured pilot barely conscious, but still alive. His flying overalls were so burnt and his face so disfigured that he was almost unrecognizable as an RAF officer. The soldiers carried him back to the underground Army Field Ambulance Station in Mercer, and one of the Army doctors initially mistook him for an enemy Italian. Eventually, he was patched up, sedated, and sent by train to the Anglo-Swiss hospital in Alexandria, where he was treated for burns, severe concussion, and spinal trauma. Initially, his face was so swollen that he could not open his eyes, and it was impossible to assess whether the accident had blinded him. The doctors did not know whether he would ever see again. Concussed, blind, and isolated from family and friends, he was disorientated and helpless. His imagination ran wild. It was a situation he recreated in an early short story, Beware of the Dog. The whole world was white and there was nothing in it. It was so white that sometimes it looked black, and after a time it was either white or black, but mostly it was white. He watched as it turned from white to black and then back to white again, and the white stayed a long time, but the black lasted only a few seconds. He got into the habit of going to sleep during the white periods, of waking up just in time to see the world when it was black. The black was very quick. Sometimes it was only a flash of black lightning. The white was slow, and in the slowness of it, he always dozed off. Gradually, his sight returned. A Harley Street surgeon reconstructed his features. Though urged to return home, Dahl insisted on staying close to his squadron. My one obsession was to get back to operational flying. He later called the crash a monumental bash on the head, not only the start of his career as a writer, but a blow that changed his personality, leaving him more reckless, more imaginative, and more determined.
Incredible. Wow. Goodness.
Yeah.
I mean, what a that I mean the description of that crash is just staggering. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you crash, you're the nose of your plane, you're and then you crawl out and then you hear your machine gun going off. I mean, geez. I
Yeah.
don't want to
You
use
can't see, you're on fire.
sure, sure. And I don't want to use therapy speak, but I mean, we're talking just like trauma after
A lot of
trauma,
trauma.
real trauma.
Yeah.
Not like, my dad was mean to me.
Yeah.
Like, or, I got a little bullied at school. They called me names, like not like, speech is violence, but like real trauma.
Yeah.
Goodness. Well, Abby, you're crushing it. You're crushing it. I'm gonna stand up. I'm gonna go use the restroom, but please keep going,
Okay.
Abby.
I
And
will keep going.
I am listening, and I'm sure the audience is also listening. And of course, on the After Dark, we're gonna talk about the spycraft. And of course, now I can
Spycraft.
see. now I can see how he could become a spy.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I mean, he's a military officer and an airman, and then of course Abby's going to pronounce the longest place name as well on the After Dark for patrons. Patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod. Keep going, Abby. You're crushing it.
Okay. On almost every occasion that he retold the events of that evening in the last 40 years of his life, Dahl recounted them as if he was entirely on his own. But there was another pilot involved. This man flew with him from Fuka on a different Gladiator, safely put his machine down on the sand close by the wreckage of Dahl's plane, and comforted the burning and bleeding Dahl through the long, cold desert night. And in Dahl's earliest version of these events, in his short stories Shot Down Over Libya and A Piece of Cake, both of which were written in wartime. He too is the other pilot is present in the narrative. In fiction, this man was called Shorty or Peter. In reality, his name was Douglas MacDonald. MacDonald, who had grown up in Kenya and learned to fly before the war at the Aero Club of East Africa, saw his friend Lofty that night in extremis, demoralized, tortured by pain, and profoundly physically vulnerable. Dahl's position since childhood as the dominant male in his family household inclined him to support others, to be the paterfamilias. In this narrative, there was little place for weakness and incapacity. Consequently, Shorty or Peter soon disappeared from the retelling of the events of the crash, yet in a remarkable letter written to Douglas MacDonald's widow Barbara in 1953, not long after her husband's death in a plane crash in the foothills of Mount Kilimanjaro, Roald offered a tiny glimpse of just how exposed he felt that evening and how much he had needed the simple consolation of human warmth and company. I expect he's told you a little of what happened that evening in the desert when we both came down and I crashed. But I doubt he explained how really marvelous he was to me and looked after me and tried to comfort me and stayed with me out there during a very cold night and kept me warm. Well, he did. And I shall always remember it most vividly, even some of the things he said, because I was quite conscious, and most of all, how when he ran over and found me not dead, he did a sort of dance of joy in the sand, and it was all very wonderful, because after all, we were not very far away from the Italians, and he had a great many other things to think about. In February 1941, he was sent to RAF Heliopolis, near Cairo, where he was put on light duties, looking after the Air Force pay packets and ferrying messages across town in a chauffeur-driven car. However, his head injuries remained slow to heal, and a return to the air was beginning to seem increasingly unlikely. Blinding headaches could still force him to abandon the simplest of tasks and retire to his room, and he was dogged by a sense of lethargy and lightheadedness. So he waited, hoping that his health would improve and that he would be able to, at last, fly in action. But despite the doctor's pessimistic prognosis about his head injuries, his one obsession was still to get back to operational flying. Um, da da da. Nowadays, doctors may well have diagnosed Dahl as suffering from what is called post-concussive syndrome. The initial symptoms of this condition are normally forgetfulness, irritability, and an inability to concentrate and severe headaches. Dahl suffered from all of these. In some patients, the symptoms disappear, but leave behind longer-lasting behavioral changes, which are usually associated with mood swings and an increased lack of inhibition. In some cases, too, it can also result in a fundamental alteration of the perception of self. With Dahl, these alterations were marginal, but they were nonetheless significant. His sense of embarrassment, which was already minimal, was further diminished. His sense of fantasy heightened, while his desire to shock became more pronounced. He emerged from the crisis more confident and more determined to make a mark. His first brush with death doubtless also played a significant part in this change of his own perception of himself, making him more aware of his vulnerability, more reflective, yet also intensifying the sense of himself as a survivor and as a figure of destiny. By spring 1941, he was back in the air, this time in a hurricane. Sent to Greece with almost no combat experience, he joined a tiny squadron facing overwhelming German forces. On the 15th of April, he flew his first patrol and the next day downed a Junkers 88. All three crew bailed out and abandoned their machine. Two
Hell
days later,
yeah. Wait,
yeah,
wow, he's out there, he's killing the Krauts. He's out there getting the Germans.
yeah,
That is cool. I had no idea that he was like a flying like a fighter pilot.
yeah.
That is badass. I think
I
this
mean,
is the
not for long, but yeah, he was a
sure.
fighter pilot.
Listen, I mean, if you listen, I think this is the first fighter pilot we've had
Oh,
on the
really?
show.
Has it not
Yeah,
been another fighter pilot?
that
Interesting.
I mean, I mean, why we're I, uh, I mean, that is cool. I know I
Yeah.
respect the hell out of that. That is serious shit. Cool.
Um, 2 days later, he had shot another into the sea, killing its pilot. It was the first time Dahl had taken a life. The issue of taking a life would doubtless go on to haunt him, as it haunted the pilot protagonist of his 1945 short story, Someone Like You, which is the title of the short story book we are going to be reading for the book club. So that short story is in that group of short stories. For the moment, however, he and the other pilots adopted a manner that was terse and matter of fact. Little was discussed or overly reflected upon, particularly death. Formalities did not exist, Dahl later wrote. Pilots came and pilots went. The others hardly noticed my presence. No real friendships existed. Each man was another flyer wrapped in a cocoon of his own problems. This situation caused a certain coolness to develop in his own personality that created a tension with his own natural exuberance. Writing in 1945 to an American friend, he tried to analyze where this indifference to going home, to losing large sums of money, to everything else which men usually care about had come from. In a strikingly honest, almost tormented letter, Dahl explained how easily young fighter pilots could become detached from almost everything. Think, he wrote, if you learn to be indifferent to death, sudden death, or if you learn to pretend to be indifferent to it, then you must surely first learn to be indifferent to everything else which is less important. To young people, nothing is less important than death because there is very little philosophy in them. As Dahl grew older and reflected more, that attitude would soften, but the strange disconnection would never completely leave him. The climax came on the 20th of April 1941 in what Dahl described as a long and beautiful dogfight. 15 Hurricanes fought up to 200 German planes over Athens. I saw the planes with black smoke pouring from their engines, bright red flashes from the Mrs. Schmitt's guns, a man climbing calmly out of his burning hurricane to jump. Dahl survived, but 3 comrades died. Their base at Elvis was soon bombed to ruin, and the squadron
Nailed it.
retreated.
I think you're talking about
Alvis
Messerschmitts. Messerschmitts.
Messerschmitts, yeah,
Yeah,
Messerschmitts is that
yeah,
one.
yeah.
But Alvis is somewhere in Greece.
Okay. Wow, this is crazy.
Yeah. And the squadron retreated to Argos. Within days, 13 of their hurricanes were destroyed in a German raid. Only 5 survived. Dahl himself was evacuated from Greece after only 10 days in action. The squadron regrouped in Palestine, fighting Vichy French forces in Syria. Vichy French forces in Syria. Dahl claimed 2 more victories, but soon collapsed with headaches, like a knife driven into your forehead. He blacked out in flight and was declared unfit to fly. His
How,
combat career was over.
how many kills did he get? I mean, how many did he
It
get
sounds like
5
it
or
was
more?
just the one
Oh,
kill. Like
but I mean,
I think a lot of the pilots like
they
abandoned the
bail out,
plane.
but I mean,
Yeah.
how many like planes did he down? Was it
I'm
like
not
4?
entirely sure
Okay,
of
because
the
I think if
yeah,
it's
there was
5 or
there was
more, I think
3 and then there was like yeah, 2 the next day.
then he
Yeah.
was an ace.
It
I
was an
think if
ace.
it's 5 or more, they call you an ace. That's
Okay.
crazy. Yeah, that is.
I
And
didn't know about your scoring system for getting planes
well,
out
I
of
mean,
the
no, I mean, I could be full of shit, but I mean, that is crazy. I had no
Mhm.
idea. I mean, that is some serious business because
Yeah.
you're not just, it's just not like they're surrendering to you. You have to have all these tactics and you're trying to sneak up to them and you're using the sun and
And they were
you're
wildly outnumbered.
incredible, incredible. Well, more targets.
What? True.
Yeah, true.
Yay, World
Yeah.
War II.
Woo.
Um, Before Dahl departed from Palestine, he was involved in one other curious incident. He was sent to report on the viability of an alternative landing ground in the event that the runways at Haifa were bombed. This potential airstrip was at a small village called Ramat David. It had been cut in a field of maize that was part of one of the earliest kibbutzes, one named after the British Prime Minister David Lloyd George, whose government had issued the 1970 Balfour Declaration that Great Britain viewed with favour the idea of establishing a Jewish home in Palestine. Quite ignorant of this background, Dahl was startled to encounter a Zionist settler and a group of Jewish orphans when he landed there. The settler, a bearded man with a strong German accent, who Dahl remembered looked like the prophet Isaiah and spoke like a parody of Hitler, tried to explain to the naive RAF pilot the need for the Jewish homeland. Dahl was unconvinced, but also fascinated by the settler's quiet sense of conviction, and particularly by his startling eyes, whose pupils seemed larger and blacker and brighter than any I had ever seen. You have a lot to learn, the man told Dahl as he got back into his hurricane, but you are a good boy. You are fighting for freedom. So am I. Dahl, who later in life became publicly anti-Zionist, returned to Haifa and reported his commanding officer that the landing strip was quite serviceable and that there were lots of children for the pilots to play with, should the squadron need to relocate there. They did. Within days, Haifa had been attacked, and the 80 Squadron, following Dahl's advice, decamped to the kibbutz to live once more among tents and olive groves. And he was going home. He drove back to Egypt, sold his car, and 2 weeks later boarded a troop ship traveling back to England around the coast of Africa, stopping at Durban, Cape Town, and Freetown in Sierra Leone, where he indulged himself buying presents for his family, sackfuls of citrus fruit, chocolate, marmalade, and expensive silks for his sisters. On the final leg of the journey, the convoy in which he was sailing was attacked by German bombers and U-boats, and 3 ships were sank. After disembarking at Liverpool, Dahl took a train to London, where he spent a night with his half-sister Ellen and her husband Ashley Miles. In the morning, he travelled by train and bus to Grendon Underwood in Buckinghamshire, where his mother was now living. She was waiting for him by the roadside. I signaled the bus driver, and he stopped the bus for me right outside the cottage, and I flew down the steps of the bus straight into the arms of the waiting mother. He had been away from home for almost 3 years.
Act two. Act two
Acting.
is, and we haven't written no children's books
We
have
haven't
been
written
written.
anything.
Anything. Whoa. Whoa, doggy.
Not written a
Goodness.
single word.
I mean,
Um,
listen, and there's something to be said, I think now, like, and of course, I'm guilty of having an MFA, but I mean, we have this culture now where it's like if you're not like a literary sensation by the time you're 25, right, it's
mhm.
over, and it's like maybe live a life, and
Yeah.
maybe you take up letters in your 40s or your 50s after you have
When
some
you have some stories to tell.
when you have some shit to say that isn't just about
Yeah.
like yourself and your family or like whatever. That's wild. I mean, this is crazy. I am rooting for him, and I'm glad
Yeah.
that he's not dead
Yet.
yet. Not dead yet.
Not dead
As long
yet.
as you're not in the ground, you can still write Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. What a story. Incredible.
At this point, I will mention the dark room again because we're about to come up to this point of his life.
It's the After Dark.
Spy time. The
It's the
after
After
dark.
Dark.
Sorry,
The After
I
Dark.
keep getting those mixed up.
You gotta get well.
Too much darkness.
You gotta get the branding right, Abby. You gotta get
Gotta
the
get the
branding right.
branding right.
Yeah,
Sorry, I
yeah.
apologize.
You're right. You're all right.
The after dark. The after dark. The after dark.
You got it. You got it.
I didn't mention that his mother's house was bombed. They had managed to move out in time. They are now living in Buckinghamshire, but yes, the house was bombed, so he was right about that. Yay, the Blitz. Anyway, I will mention a little bit about his time in America because it is significant and I don't want anyone to miss out on that. All right. Roald Dahl's post-war years began with difficulty. Invalided out of flying, he returned to Britain restless and unhappy. Accustomed to the freedom and adventure of being a pilot, he found domestic life and rationing oppressive, and his family noticed changes in him. His sisters noticed that even his Norwegian roots, once proudly claimed, were downplayed, as if loyalty to the nation he was willing to die for was his sole identity. In 1942, Dahl's life shifted when, through a chance dinner with Harold Balfour, the Conservative Party Undersecretary for Air, he was recruited to join the British Embassy in Washington as assistant air attaché. His role was to embody the RAF's courage and win American sympathy. Washington, still reeling from Pearl Harbor, was fertile ground for Dahl's stories of battle. He lectured widely, if reluctantly, and impressed many with his sharp wit and striking appearance. His real breakthrough came when the novelist C.S. Forester had been commissioned to write about Roald's flying experiences, and an enthusiastic Dahl ended up writing them himself, producing A Piece of Cake, later retitled Shot Down Over Libya. The experience was revelatory. He discovered the thrill of storytelling and the transformation of fact into fiction. The piece's success marked the beginning of his literary career. Soon after, Roald began developing tales about gremlins, mischievous sprites RAF pilots blamed for mechanical failures. Recounting stories he had made up with fellow RAF pilot Douglas Bisgood, whom he had met on the boat over to America, he spun elaborate folklore, later shaping it into a story that reached Walt Disney. Disney saw promise, and for a time, a feature film seemed likely. Dahl was invited to Burbank Studios, where he mingled with Hollywood stars and oversaw the production of an illustrated book, The Gremlins, published in 1943. The book sold well, even reaching Eleanor Roosevelt, but the film was abandoned. Disney judged the war-weary public had lost interest in such stories. Still, Dahl had made his first mark.
Incredible.
Washington off,
So,
yeah, really incredible.
And Disney.
Disney.
Previous
Like, I wrote a short story.
Sure, friend of the pod. We covered.
Oh,
we
have a
covered.
Disney episode?
Yeah, we have a Disney episode. We do.
Okay.
We do. Yeah, Disney was
Yeah.
was a nutcase. Yeah, but also
I could see that.
but also very involved in World War II. I mean, he was like the chief propagandist, in the United States for the American cause.
Yeah.
In many ways. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There you go.
That makes sense why the Gremlins would have interested him then.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. This is shocking. What a life. I mean, and then this is another example. This is the thing we always say on the pod is that there are only like 25,000
Yeah.
people alive at any given time. It's like, like everybody else is just NPCs.
A lot of friends of the pod are gonna pop up.
What a
lot
world.
of
What a strange world we live in. It's so bizarre. Anyway. I'm loving this,
Washington.
Abby.
Good.
I'm loving this, and I hope the audience is too. I'm sure they are.
Washington offered more than writing opportunities. Dahl mixed in powerful political circles, befriending Vice President Henry Wallace and socialite Charles Marsh, who became like a surrogate father to Roald. His evenings with both men at Marsh's Longley estate brought him into Roosevelt's orbit. Dahl's charm, sharp eye, and gossip soon caught the attention of British intelligence. Through William Stevenson's British Security Coordination, the BSC, Dahl drifted into covert work, passing on information gleaned from conversations with Wallace and others. His access proved valuable, particularly when Wallace's unguarded plans for post-war policy reached Churchill and confirmed suspicions of American designs on Britain's empire. Even as he navigated politics and espionage, Dahl's writing flourished. Short stories poured out of him, often blending wartime realism with surreal invention. Early pieces like The Sword and others set in Africa revealed his talent for combining stark detail with fantasy. Critics and editors praised his vivid economical style. Anne Watkins became his literary agent, adding him to a stable of distinguished writers such as Hemingway and Dylan Thomas, and publishers competed for his work. By 1943, Dahl's double life as a diplomat writer spy was in full swing. At Hyde Park, he charmed Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt, reporting details back to London with his mix of humor and precision. His intelligence work strengthened British influence, and while his stories reached even wider audiences. Though sometimes reckless and outspoken, he proved indispensable to the wartime effort both as propagandist and as a writer. Roald Dahl returned to Britain determined to write full-time, supported by a modest pension and his inheritance. From his mother's garden in Grendon Underwood, he grew vegetables to supplement rationing, writing excitedly to his agent Anne Watkins about his new life. Yet the post-war mood soon seeped into his fiction. His first short story collection, Over to You, was published in America in 1946 and drew mixed reviews. One critic praised his gift for inhabiting the narrow margin separating shadow from substance. Nona Balakian in the New York Times Book Review celebrated the visionary quality of Dahl's stories and praised his ability to communicate a sensation that has often nothing to do with us as earthbound creatures. She also commended his ability to inhabit the narrow margin separating shadow from substance. The New Yorker critic, while complaining that the public had now heard from a great many writing aviators, warmed to Mr. Dahl's original turn of mind, and in particular to two stories from the collection which were assaulted with some good low comedy. Another applauded his savage and pitiful humor. The moment that delighted Dahl most as a writer was a letter from legendary editor Maxwell Perkins, who called one story the best sense of aerial combat I've ever read. He explained great interest in publishing a novel should Dahl ever write one. Dahl turned to a novel Sometime Never, recasting his whimsical gremlins as sinister trolls. Faces weird and frightening with a deathless, ageless expression. A dark satire shaped by John Hersey's Hiroshima article. He now wanted to attack the bullshit in which man wallows. So
I don't blame him.
Yeah, right. His gremlins in the Disney era were originally sort of more like whimsical and like it could be a film that children could watch. And then when he went to write his first novel, they became like a more sinister adult type of thing.
We're friends of whimsy on the pod. We
I
love
do, yeah, I do like
we
whimsy.
like
Yeah.
whimsy. Yeah, we're very big on whimsy. In fact, if you don't get to some whimsy soon, I don't know what I'm going to do because it's been so dark. This is one of the really truly one of the darkest episodes. So you're delivering on the promise of the premise, Abby. Congratulations. I think you finally really hit your stride here. I had again, completely unexpected out of this dude. So keep going.
His own politics at the time were complex. Like many from his background, combat had turned him from an instinctive conservative into someone who felt that the suffering of war demanded a more just and transformative peace. It is not clear which way he cast his vote, if he voted at all, in the May 1945 general election, which swept Winston Churchill's Conservatives from office and brought Clement Attlee's reforming socialists to power. But it is more than likely that Dahl was initially a supporter of the new government. While finishing the book, Dahl's back pain landed him in a military hospital during Britain's coldest winter, where even the boilers had no coal. Shortly after Roald left the hospital in January 1947, Perkins sent the convalescing author a long letter sympathizing over his spine operation, gossiping about their mutual friend, Old Hem. Dahl was a friend of Hemingway's, and asking eagerly.
Oh man. I need to make more friends.
Well, maybe it's you just don't know which ones are going to become Hemingway
I think
or
all of
Dahl.
our well,
Yeah. I mean, at our age, Dahl was still a dude
sure,
who had
sure.
not written his first children's book.
I think a lot of our stuff just happens online now. I think we're just a
Yeah.
little more online. I mean, I'm certainly very online. Um, we're on Twitter at Art of Dark Pod. I need to spend less time on Twitter. This has been the most doom scrolly week that I've ever had. So I'm gonna take a break, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Anyway,
more on Instagram where the pretty
I
pictures are.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm shocked that I mean Maxwell Perkins has come up. I mean again,
Mhm.
totally I did not expect that. I mean, I guess maybe I should have. He's an author, but yeah, and then Hemingway too. Where did he meet Hemingway?
Yeah, somewhere in
Did
America.
it say
That'll come in the
somewhere in
after
America?
dark. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, great.
I've
Right.
I've largely skipped over the time that he made
Okay.
all of these
Un
friends.
understood. Understood. So we'll cover that on the After Dark for patrons.
Yeah.
Cool.
Um okay, so he's in the hospital. Uh Perkins was asking eagerly about the novel which he heard was almost complete. Dahl was slowly revising his manuscript in the light of Watkins' comments and did not want to submit the book to Scribner's until he felt it was ready. These changes took him another 5 months. The first person to read it at Scribner's was Perkins' close associate and contemporary, the poet John Hall Wheelock, whose protective, almost paternal attitude to Roald mirrored that of Perkins. Wheelock was immediately enthusiastic with the novel, agreeing with Anne Watkins that it was an important piece of work and describing it as contemporary satire in the mold of Jonathan Swift. He wrote to Dahl effusively, describing the deep impression the book had made on him and concluding that it was a difficult piece of work beautifully carried out. Wheelock added that the copy had been sent to Perkins' new home in New Canaan, Connecticut, and the great man was now in the middle of reading it. Dahl waited anxiously for his verdict. It never came. 2 days after he had received the manuscript, Perkins contracted viral pneumonia and died. He was 62 years old.
That sucks.
That really sucks.
You send your novel off to like one of the probably the most famous editor in the world, and then
And it
death.
might have been the last thing he read.
Right? And
Yeah.
fascinating. Wow. Yeah, we need to cover Maxwell Perkins at some point. Yeah, what
Mhm.
an and he's one of those like the sort of like the spider at the at the center of the big
Yeah.
web of the 20th century for sure. Yeah.
Um, the manuscript of Sometime Never, possibly the last thing he ever read, was left on his desk with his notes by its side. Dahl was devastated when he heard the news. A week later, Wheelock wrote to him, thanking him for his letter of condolence and informing him that Max had been intending to tell Dahl of his admiration for the Gremlin book. Wheelock added that he too had the greatest confidence in Dahl's talent and assured him that Scribner's were very lucky to be your publishers. Dahl was acutely aware that he lacked a powerful advocate in London. No publisher there responded to him with anything like the warmth and support he received from Hitchcock, Perkins, or Wheelock, nor could he find a representative who really believed in him and wanted to launch his UK career. He had regarded his first UK agent, David Higham, as a dirty old bastard and fired him within weeks of returning from the United States. Peter Watt, whom he had hired as a replacement on Anne Watkins' recommendation, was now proving to be equally disappointing. Watt was usually too busy to see him, and Dahl was constantly made aware of how low he stood in the agency's pecking order. It took Dahl more than a decade to find anyone in London who believed in him professionally as much as many people did in the United States. The Americans took the handsome, uniformed, opinionated outsider to their hearts. In conformist Britain and out of uniform, things were different. There, Dahl seemed peripheral rather than exotic, a misfit, as his niece Anna Corey described him. He had not been to university, yet he was neither working class nor an eccentric aristocrat. He was classless. He was political without a party affiliation. He loved good wine and glamorous company, yet he lived in a country cottage with his mother, surrounded by a menagerie of animals. On top of that, he lacked a certain literary sophistication, and he knew it.
Yeah,
When some,
didn't
yeah,
not Oxbridge.
no,
And right, and if you're in Britain, I mean, and maybe Abby, you can explain this a little more to me, but if you're in Britain, certainly at this time, and it's maybe softened, I mean, I'm sure it's softened a great deal, but class is like race here in America.
yeah,
Class there is
I
like, yeah, yeah.
I also think I think it still exists in like publishing and certainly in like film and TV.
Oh,
There's
without a doubt.
a lot of like a lot of the people who are running it are of like classes that may have been considered aristocratic in the past, and so like the nepotism like funneling down from those is still like a big
R-
thing that people
r-
are trying to like
the
shake
the
up a bit.
the Wikipedia chain where it's like you go
Yeah.
you've made your first feature film and it's at Cannes and then you click on the link and you go it's like oh you're royalty
Yeah,
like
because they're like
like
the great like whoever of someone who like made their fortune in something
in
difficult and
rubber
tough, and you're like,
sure yeah
I don't want to go into the rubber business. I'm gonna be a I'm
right
gonna
right
take my
right
inheritance and become a book publisher, and then
right
you know,
right right yeah yeah yeah
yeah.
so there's yeah we all know what and of course we all know what a nepo
And then they
baby is
hire
and
their
everything
Oxbridge
sure
friends, and
and yeah
yeah,
and it just all kind of spins out and then yeah and then they quietly resent us uh and that's all right
yeah.
it's
So that was
mutual
what he was
it's
kind of
mutual
like dealing with at the time.
yeah 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 sure nothing changes
Nothing changes. When Sometime Never was eventually published in the United States in April 1948, it was met with faint praise. Roald immediately distanced himself from the novel, telling Anne Watkins that he now thought it was a bad book. No one I've given it to so far likes it, he complained, speculating that it might actually do his writing career more harm than good if it were to be published in Britain. In May, he wrote again, telling her that every review of the book stinks to high heaven and how he was depressed about this writing business. He was exaggerating, for while the New York Times was critical of its repetitiousness and verbosity, and critics like Bergen Evans found the cumbrousness of his supernatural machinery hard going, there was praise for the moral intent of the book and also for its lyricism and humor. Evans, in particular, singled out for special praise the unquaint realism of its many descriptive passages. The
okay
critical rejection, yeah, he,
he's in it he's in the literary
he's in
world
it.
now
He
yeah
he had a little artistic meltdown.
okay.
No one likes my book. I've been there. I've been there.
I've been there too.
Yeah. The critical rejection of Sometime Never marked a turning point. From that moment on, the sensitive author narrator, also so strong a presence in all of Dahl's early fiction, began to disappear, increasingly hidden by a mask of artifice and plot, while his exuberant sense of satirical fantasy also melted into the background. For more than a decade, his stories would be characterized by a wit that was hard, brutal, and often cruel. Sometime Never also severed the direct link between writing and flying in Dahl's fiction. Early in 1945, when he sent the manuscript of Someone Like You to Anne Watkins, he had apologized for the fact that it was still more or less on the same old theme. If you have a little patience, he continued, I shall soon get that out of my system. It had taken him 3 years, but now he had finally done so. Yet finding a new voice was not so easy.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah. I'm glad that he
Despite
doesn't I'm glad that he doesn't give up. Like
no,
he's really committed to this, which I guess
yeah, I
yeah.
mean, like he's now entering a period where he maybe a little bit does kind of like
Yeah, sure.
he
He's like
this is
yeah.
we're starting to get into like a I guess the is it a midpoint? I don't know, but there is a period of time where he seems he's still writing, but he seems kind of aimless, and that's he has the he has the luxury um of inheritance at this point to be able to be aimless.
Sure. Yeah, and that's
He
okay.
sort of starts
Yeah.
trying some things out. But yeah, it is okay because like he maybe does need to just sit down for a moment because he's been through some shit.
Yeah, it's okay to just pause. Just
You
chill
can
out.
just
Take a
pause.
sabbatical.
Yeah.
Take a
Yeah.
sabbatical. And even if you're not rich, just work your job. Work your job, come home,
Yeah.
turn on Netflix. The new season of King of the Hill is amazing, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. Just apropos nothing.
Okay.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. All right.
Um, despite being surrounded by his family in the Valley of the Dolls, as his daughter Tessa would later describe it, Roald was dogged by something akin to depression. His contact with children leavened the gloom a little. Forays into the woods and fields with his model aeroplane and his nieces and nephew could not disguise the fact that his relationship with his mother, now in her early 60s, had deteriorated badly. It was a difficult time when neither mother nor son seems to have understood the other. Both were drinking heavily. Roald may have felt that she was incapable of understanding what he had been through in the war, of comprehending why he had changed. Perhaps Sophie Magdalene felt too that now her beloved Apple was in his early 30s. He should be married with a proper job. It is hard to make a judgment as so few clues to her inner world have survived, and Roald kept none of the letters she wrote to him. Yet circumstantial evidence suggests a need to escape her son occasionally because throughout the entire period that he was living with her between 1946 and 1951, she rented a cottage in Cornwall, Greystones at Prasands near Land's End. It was a place to which she could disappear whenever she needed to be alone with her dogs. The streak of melancholy of a need for isolation ran deeply through the Dahl genes. His principal daytime pursuit was greyhound racing. This passion was to be one of the main drains on his inheritance his father left him. At one time, Roald had as many as 16 dogs under the supervision of his trainer Tommy, an Irishman with no teeth and two left eyes, and a profound knowledge of all the lousy, dirty, bastardly tricks in the greyhound racing trade.
Two
Though the
left
dogs,
eyes.
two left eyes.
I don't know what that means, but I'll accept it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they both looked
They look a
one
little
way.
wonky. They look a
Yeah.
little wonky. What is do they still race greyhounds? They
No, no,
no. Oh, that's
no.
done.
When I first moved here, they did, and I went to a greyhound race one time. But no, they
Huh.
don't. And they like, at least I don't think they do. That like a lot of the greyhound racing tracks have closed down, and
Huh.
there's like a charity that rehomes former racing dogs.
Ah, I see. Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Not a big thing these days.
I see. I see.
Yeah. Where was I? Though the dogs consumed only a small amount of his time when he went up once a week to pay Tommy his wages, they and the cunning wily folk who hung around him intrigued Dahl hugely and fed his literary imagination for his next novel. His new novel, 50,000 frog skins, like greenback was slang for dollar bills, whose main character were a pair of comic rural swindlers obsessed with making their fortune through a brilliant and ingenious scam. If things go right, he told Anne Watkins, there's just a chance the novel will be a good one. No more satiric or metaphysical bullshit like Gremlins, just ordinary stuff. This ordinary novel would become perhaps the strangest thing he ever wrote, a twisted comic portrayal of the 4 years he spent in Great Missenden and Old Amersham between 1946 and 1950. Roald was also doing some work as a part-time dealer in antiques and painting. He was not entirely impoverished. He still had some of his inheritance invested in the stock market, and art was in his blood. It had fascinated him since childhood, while his wartime relationship with Millicent Rogers had begun to open his eyes to the way the art market worked. While he was in the US, he had a few older ladies that he liked to spend time with,
Ah,
rich older ladies.
I see.
Uh, Rich older
Okay.
ladies with impressive art collections.
Very nice.
So,
Very nice. Okay.
Millicent
All right.
Rogers was one of these. um,
Millicent. You don't hear that name much anymore, do you?
no.
Millicent. Hmm.
Yeah, so his wartime relationship with Millicent Rogers had begun to open his eyes to the way the art market worked. Soon he was buying works of art for Charles Marsh, his like surrogate father who was in the US, and his excitement at a picture that took his fancy could be overwhelming. It might be something like the French expressionist Georges fucking hell. Rouault, Rouault, whose brilliant cover and color and savage satire electrified him. Dahl bought four of his paintings in 1946. Cézanne had a similar effect. Recognizing a kindred spirit, perhaps, he admired the combination of craftsmanship and expressive ambition, describing Cézanne to Charles Marsh as the greatest of them all, a delicate and subtle giant who reached out further towards unobtainable perfection than any other man in any form of art ever has done. Dahl had not acquired these opinions entirely by himself. He had his own formidable tutor, Matthew Smith, one of the most important British painters of the 20th century. The two men met for the first time in the autumn of 1941 after Roald had been invalided home from Palestine. The Blitz had abated. Roald had gone up to London and began to wander in the art galleries around Bond Street. Initially, he simply peered through the windows, then, spellbound by one of Smith's pictures, probably a lush and voluptuous portrait of a woman, he plucked up the courage to enter Tooth's gallery. He asked the gallery owner where he could see more of Mr. Smith's work, and he was told the artist had disappeared. Dahl eventually tracked him down through a series of forwarding addresses to a shabby hotel on Piccadilly near Hyde Park Corner, where he knocked on the door unannounced. From within, one of Bach's Brandenburg concertos was playing on a tiny gramophone. After several minutes, the door opened and Smith peered out. He looked, as Dahl recalled, like a small frightened animal coming out of its hole. It was a remarkable first meeting. Mr. Smith? Yes. Mr. Matthew Smith? Yes. I really only came here to tell you how much I like your pictures, I said, because that was all I had to say. I did not realize then that he had not long before lost both his sons in the RAF, and that the shock of seeing a young man outside standing in a full RAF uniform with wings on his chest must have been tremendous.
Wow.
Though Smith, yeah. Though Smith was more than 40 years older, an instant rapport formed between them, and by the time Dahl was posted to Washington, the two men were firm friends. At 25, Roald had been able to access the £5,000 in his trust fund, equivalent to perhaps £175,000 in contemporary purchasing power and more than 38 times his annual salary. And with part of it, he purchased two other Matthew Smiths, some watercolors by Smith's great friend Jacob Epstein, and a small portfolio of impressionists and post-impressionists. He took them all back to Washington with him, where he told his mother they were greatly admired. But while he enjoyed dealing, he bought the paintings mostly for the pleasure of looking at them. Each time I sold a short story, he later wrote, I would buy a picture. Then, because it took me so long to write another story, I would invariably have to sell the picture I had bought 6 months before. In those days, fine pictures were inexpensive. Many paintings that today could be acquired only by millionaires decorated my walls for brief periods in the late 40s. Matisse's, Soutines, Cézanne watercolors, Bernard's, Boudin's, a Renoir, a Sicily, a Degas seascape, and God knows what else. As 50,000 Frogskins neared its conclusion, Dahl's sense of alienation from the British literary establishment was further exacerbated by his dealings with the BBC. Thanks to the patronage of Alfield's friend, the broadcaster Archie Gordon, Roald had given a most un-BBC talk about dog racing in 1948. Following this, the BBC broadcast of three of his news stories, the early drafts of The Soldier, Skin, and Man from the South. So they broadcast that. Okay. Now, after the failure of Sometime Never, his new submissions were increasingly being met with rejection, and Roald began to rail against the discriminating literary gentlemen of the BBC's third programme. Returning from a trip to Central Europe with Charles Marsh, where he had visited Hitler's eagle's nest and gazed out upon the surrounding snowy peaks, he quipped to Gordon that he had dreamed dreams of glory and conquest, ridiculous, unattainable dreams, such as selling a story to the British Broadcasting Corporation and sticking a needle through the eye of a camel. I too have had these dreams. BBC, tough crowd. Um, By Christmas 1950, the first draft of the new novel was complete. On Boxing Day, Roald wrote to Anne Watkins that he was doing some revisions, but that he was pleased with his book, which was filled with stuff I know and have seen, which is solid stuff that is true and dirty and sorrowful and amusing. But he warned her that it would be very different from everything before. A month later, it was quite finished. No one had seen a word of it apart from the girl in the village who typed it, who was in turn disgusted, horrified, amused, and then disgusted again. He was obviously nervous, warning Watkins that though he liked the book, it was not very classical, and confessing that he trembled to send it to her. So he didn't. He sent it instead to Peter Wilde at Collins, thinking perhaps Wilde would understand its English subject matter better than she would. It was a mistake. A week later, he got a brief, curt, terrifying letter from Wilde and his colleague Milton Waldman, informing him that the company would not be exercising its option to publish. Dahl then sent the manuscript to Watkins for her opinion, pointing out that Wilde, a devout Christian, and Waldman, a Jew, had perhaps been offended by some of the things he had written. This will only get worse later in his life. Would you be a sweetie and send me a cable as soon as you read it? He begged. This is in the cable to his agent, saying whether it's good or bad or ordinary to put me out of my misery. Watkins took him at his word, sending him a telegram that was terse and unequivocal. Frogskin's unpublishable present form, construction unsound, too many loose ends, air mailer upcoming. Maternal and yet thoroughly professional, Watkins followed up her cable the next day with a detailed letter explaining to Roald that she found the book not dirty, but dull, for you not nearly good enough. With judicious cuts and edits, she thought he could probably salvage it. Dahl, however, did not read her letter. He did not even open it. He was too scared. He took a plane to Lebanon, and from Beirut, he scribbled her a postcard. Dear Anne, I got your cable and then I fled. I have not read your letter. I have not dared to read it. Perhaps it's chasing me, but I don't think it will ever catch me because I am moving fast. Roald. So yeah, second novel problems.
He's like Indiana Jones. I mean, he's just like,
Yeah.
this is crazy. I could just hear that. I could just see the shot in Indiana Jones where it's the plane is like flying and then you see the line
Yeah.
and he's Beirut and then DC and meeting the president and then I'm back to London and appearing in front of this mousy artist and what a life. Wild. No wonder that book is 600 and
Yeah.
X pages long. Wild.
Yeah.
Man. We lives now are so dull.
Yeah.
We
I was reading this biography going, oh yeah, I
sure.
really haven't done a lot.
Yeah. You just sort of just sit in front of the TV and sit online
Hmm.
and yeah, okay. All right. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. We should all go out and do some more.
Yeah, we should all go out and live for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was the greatest professional crisis of Dahl's career. His savior at this moment of watershed was Charles Marsh. Charles swept his friend out of England onto an extended trip, offering him a salaried job working for the Public Welfare Foundation in New York and securing him an indefinite US working visa. It's good friends. He even put him up in the guest wing of his own apartment. Both Charles and his secretary Claudia understood more clearly than anyone else that their friend was in need, and their remedial actions were swift and transformative. They offered him a safe, supportive, and secure environment in which he could rebuild himself, and their speedy, decisive action almost certainly saved him from a more serious breakdown. In his own files, he destroyed the letter from Anne Watkins and Peter Wilde that dealt with the rejection of frog skins. A copy of the manuscript survived, but nothing else. It was a moment of failure and humiliation over which he rapidly drew a shroud. New York offered Dahl a refuge, financial security, old friends, and the city that had made him a celebrity. Yet he felt isolated from his family and the English countryside he loved. At 36, he was again reliant on Charles Marsh, and the rejections of 50,000 frog skins had dented his confidence. He began dating Suzanne Horvath, a clever Hungarian-American divorcee with a young child. She could beat him at chess, something he found both attractive and irritating, and soon he proposed. But the engagement was short-lived. I am pleased they will not get married unless they are sure of making each other happy, Claudia told Sophie Magdalene. Adding bluntly, Roald is not rich enough for keeping a divorced wife. By 1952, the relationship was over. That autumn, Dahl met actress Patricia Neal, 26 years old at the time. The dark-haired Southern beauty with her distinctive deep chocolate voice had just completed a series of live shows for American troops stationed in Korea, which culminated in her being almost raped by a sex-starved soldier in Seoul. She was exhausted. A promising movie career had dissolved in a series of disappointments and heartaches, and now she was returning to the city where she had made her name, winning a Tony Award for Best Actress at only 20. That accolade had secured her a movie contract with Warner Brothers in Los Angeles, but none of the movie contract with Warner Brothers in Los Angeles, but none of the 13 films she subsequently made there had shown her talent in a positive light. In her 2 movies with Ronald Reagan, she was described as gauche, embarrassing, painful, and ill at ease, with reviewers complaining about her inexperience and lack of subtlety.
How do you really feel? That's a word you don't hear very often anymore, is gauche.
Gauche.
Yeah, I'm afraid I've been gauche at times. It's a good word. It's a good French word.
Yeah.
And it's a French word we can pronounce.
Yes. Yeah. Nailed it.
Nailed it. It's a real thing though, is gauche. It has a there's no equivalent in English. I guess you'd maybe say cringe would be maybe the nearest equivalent, but there's something that the word gauche sort of carries. It's a little different, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I've insulted you in a way that makes me sound very smart.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
Yeah. And mannered. Despite appearing in 3 movies that would go on to become cult classics, The Fountainhead, The Breaking Point, and science fiction classic The Day the Earth Stood Still, Neal's confidence was destroyed, and the contract with Warner's was not renewed. This professional disappointment was compounded by the failure of her relationship with Cooper. What have I deleted that tells me who that guy is? There was another actor that
would it be Gary Cooper? Maybe Gary Cooper.
Is it Gary Cooper? I want to say like Tom, but I don't know.
We can't get get everything right. We can't get everything.
We can't get everything right.
We can't do
yeah, if you want to look up who Patricia Neal's like fiance was before Roald Dahl.
Let me look up Patricia Neal fiance. Go on. I'll get it. Yeah. Yeah.
Not only did the understated movie star, almost twice Neal's age, eventually abandon her to return to his wife. Okay, so a man that she had an affair with. He insisted that
Gary Cooper. Gary Cooper.
Okay, it was Gary Cooper. Yeah. So Patricia Neal was in a relationship with Gary Cooper. She got pregnant. He insisted that she abort their child. As a consequence, she suffered a serious mental breakdown and unfairly won herself a reputation amongst gossip columnists as a homewrecker. At a dinner hosted by their mutual friend Lillian Hellman, Pat was instantly attracted to the lean, handsome writer towering over the other guests. Dahl confessed years later that at this point, both he and Pat were equally eager to get married. And this may have explained why Hellman seated them next to each other. Both were attractive and eligible, both were drawn to glamour and celebrity, both were also straight talking. Yet both were bruised as well. Pat, like Roald, was also often melancholy. The relationship did not get off to a good start. Pat had noticed the lean, handsome man who towered over the other guests as soon as she entered the room and was instantly attracted to him. But Roald was in no mood for flirtation that night. He ignored the young actress seated next to him and instead monopolized Bernstein, whom he regarded as the young musical genius of America and who was sitting opposite him at the table. Leonard Bernstein, I believe. Um, uh, Never once during the entire evening did he look my way, Pat later recalled, remembering that Rold's behavior had infuriated her, and that by the time she left Hellman's apartment, she had quite made up her mind that she loathed Roald Dahl. Dahl agreed that he had behaved badly. His excuse was characteristic, that once he had gotten to an argument with Bernstein, there was no backing off from it. In any event, composers interested him more than actresses. Before he left Hellman's apartment, however, he got Pat's telephone number and called her the following morning to ask her out on a date. She initially refused her horrible dinner companion, but when he rang again 2 days later, she weakened and accepted the invitation. Yes. At dinner, Pat found him transformed. He was acquainted with just about everything, with just about everybody. He spoke of paintings and antique furniture and joys of the English countryside. He was as charming that evening as he had been rude the first time we met. Over wine, he told her, "I would rather be dead than fat," which made her laugh and agree.
I would rather be dead than fat. Just say, just it's a different time. It's a different time. This is just so like so now he's in Hollywood and it's just all so like what a lot again. I just
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
he was, again, we will go over it in the After Dark, but he was in Hollywood before.
Hmm.
He is
Yeah.
just now, he's now returned to New York
I see.
and
He's back in New York, but it's
hanging
just
out
all
with his
he's like actors and actresses and it's just like yeah,
composers and
yeah.
directors and
Yeah, sure.
producers and
But I'm sure if you show up and you're like, I was an RAF pilot in the war, people are gonna just go, okay, I
oh, they
want to
loved
let
it.
I want to
Yeah.
hear all about this. Tell me all about this. And he comes with this accent, I'm sure, and
Yeah.
money comes from
Yeah.
money, Greyhound racing. It's just like just a
It's like
care
an eccentric.
an absolute character. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Charles Marsh approved of the relationship, whispering to Dahl as they left, "Drop the other baggage. I like this one." Dahl listened. His pursuit of Pat was, as she later described it, deliberate. He knew exactly what he wanted, and he quietly went about getting it. But both instinctively drew back from the idea of commitment. Pat's reluctance here was made more intense by the fact that she suspected she was still in love with Gary Cooper. Indeed, her attachment to Roald might well have come to nothing had Charles Marsh not intervened. "He loved me," said Pat of Dahl's mentor, "and he desperately wanted us to get married." To this end, she recalled how Marsh had forced the issue soon after she met him by asking her how much money she had in the bank. Though she prevaricated and tried to avoid answering, he eventually made her admit that she had $20,000 saved from her work in the movies. Pat was proud of the figure, but shocked at Marsh's unexpected reply. "Ah, yes, that is poor," he had murmured. She was surprised that he thought the wealth of his protege's potential spouse was so important, but Charles knew Roald well. The scholar gypsy was also a sybarite. Sybarite? Sybarite. The world of heated indoor swimming pools and vast indoor croquet lawns of butlers, fine wines, chauffeurs, and private flying boats was by no means everything to Dahl, but its luxury attracted him. As he once admitted to Sheila St. Lawrence, who would eventually become his agent, the rich were always interesting. Pat was flattered that despite her relative lack of funds, Charles still believed she would make Roald the right wife. However, when Roald unexpectedly asked her to marry him one evening in her dressing room, she was astonished, and much to his chagrin, she refused. He looked horrified that I'd turned him down, she remembered, but she was still not really sure that she loved him, or indeed that she really wanted to get married at all. At the same time, she knew that her responses were confused. And I did want marriage and a family. Roald would have beautiful children. What was I holding out for? A great love? That would never come again. When was I going to face reality? She said no, but a few weeks later she changed her mind. On May 16th, 1953, Roald wrote to his mother about his plans to come back to England in the summer. His dates had changed slightly, he told her, because he had decided to bring Pat with him as well. At that point, he told his mother almost nothing about her, just a little about her family background and a bit more about how much money she was earning. Proudly, he boasted that she was being paid $1,000 a week for the Children's Hour in New York, a play that she was in, and that she had just agreed to go on tour in September for a run of 5 months at $1,250 a week. He told her that he thought these figures were pretty good, and they were particularly by comparison with what he was earning. We are considering getting married, he continued, but there doesn't seem to be any point in hurrying it. She's 26 and not been married before, so is almost as cautious as I am. Therefore, what we propose to do is buy a car here in New York, a good secondhand 1951 Jaguar four-seat convertible, about 850 pounds, and ship it direct to Rome. When we would then fly to Rome.
Go on.
We would then fly to Rome, pick up the car, and drive slowly up Italy through France, and so to England, arriving maybe somewhere around early August. Dahl told his mother that on the trip, they would be sharing all of the expenses, including those associated with the car. That trip turned out to be a honeymoon. Pat and Roald were married on July 2nd, only 6 weeks after he had written that letter to his mother, in a small church in downtown New York near Wall Street. Despite several warnings against the match from friends like Dashiell Hammett, who thought Dahl a very silly, dull fellow, and Leonard Bernstein, who thought she was making the biggest mistake of her life, Pat went ahead, partly won senses because she did not feel strong enough to pull away, and also because she needed to make a commitment to the future rather than to continue to dwell on her fractured love affair with Gary Cooper. Yeah.
Have they made a movie about his life?
Yes.
They have.
But more it was more a movie about her life.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
But yeah. Wow. I mean, a film about Roald Dahl's life would be remarkable,
That would be something. Yeah.
wouldn't it? Wouldn't it?
They just closed out a West End play
Ah,
about his later life in
mhm.
which John Lithgow? John
Right.
Lithgow?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
plays him. Perfect casting.
Okay. I think I had
Like they
heard
look
that.
really similar. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think I had heard that was
Yeah.
pretty good.
I didn't get to see it, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Charles Marsh once again provided the crucial impetus, presenting Roald with a huge yellow sapphire ring to give to his bride and offering to host the reception afterwards in his apartment. Claudia Haynes, who was herself scheduled to marry Charles in Paris 2 weeks later, so I think this is like Charles Marsh's like third wife. She was his secretary and then became his wife. Anyway, wrote to Sophie Magdalene some 10 days before the wedding, expressing her personal pleasure at the engagement. She told Mrs. Dahl that Roald and Pat were as happy as two people can be, while conceding rather disingenuously that she and Charles had been very careful to be enthusiastic without trying to become matchmakers. Yet even before the knot was tied, the arguments were beginning. Dahl's high-handed behavior towards Neil's friends provoked a row one evening where she told Roald that he was rude, arrogant, and nasty, and that she wanted to call off the wedding. Roald did not apologize. It was Pat who relented and backed down. She did manage to persuade him to have a church wedding, but he made her agree it would be small and simple. Returning to the United States had kick-started Roald's writing career. He had abandoned 50,000 Frogskins, but Sheila St. Lawrence, now his agent, had persuaded him to salvage some of its episodes and turn them into the four Claude's Dogs short stories, which eventually appeared in his next collection, Someone Like You, in response to the energy he felt around him. His productivity also increased markedly. Then the New Yorker bought some of his tales. Taste, about an acqui- acquis- acquisitive father who stakes his 18-year-old daughter's hand in marriage in a bet against a lecherous middle-aged wine connoisseur. Shortly afterwards, the magazine bought another new tale, My Lady Love, My Dove, about the nasty suburban couple who bug their guest's bedroom to listen to their conversations. It also published Skin, the final version of his story, a picture for Dreely, about the man with the Soutine masterpiece tattooed on his back.
That is
So
obviously getting stories picked up by the New Yorker. That's massive.
yeah, and he was
Yeah,
he was
yeah.
getting paid. He was getting paid like $1,000 a pop for each of these stories, which is
Yes, of
probably
course.
what you get paid now.
Sure. Right. Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's something we talk about on the podcast. Many times is you, these people in the 30s and the 40s, they would sell two stories and then go buy a villa in France.
Yeah. He
Yeah.
yeah, he was just living off these short
Sure.
stories for
Sure.
years and
Yeah.
years.
Sure. Well, the dollar actually had value then.
Although he was transferring it to pounds, so
Sure. Yeah.
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 Which at the time had value.
Back when things were real.
Uh yeah. Yeah. Roald and Pat's honeymoon was not a success. Alfred Knopf, who had loaned Roald at least $3,000 to pay for it, uh, yeah, Alfred Knopf had loaned Roald at least $3,000 to pay for it. But the car that Roald had shipped over from America at great expense turned out to be unreliable and frequently broke down, while his attempt to show his new wife the great cultural sights of Italy and France went largely unappreciated. Pat had spent most of the time asleep in the car, totally uninterested in the paintings, architecture, and ancient monuments he had lined up for her to see. She was more intrigued by the tropical fish that swam behind the glass at one end of the at one end of the tub in the bathroom of the luxurious hotel that they stayed in Positano. Pat later acknowledged that she had been very bad on that honeymoon, and that she had spent much of the time inwardly regretting her decision to marry. When she arrived in England, however, things started to look up. The Dahls as a family took her to their hearts immediately. The reality was not quite so straightforward. Both the twins, that I think is one of the twins are nieces, I think, of Roald Dahl's. There's sisters' children. Remembered that More, which is what they would call Sophie instead of grandmother, was initially far from impressed when her new daughter-in-law drifted down from her bedroom in the kitchen of the Wisteria Cottage each day, almost at lunchtime, wearing a pink chiffon negligee and matching feathered dressing gown. She expected a wife to be able to cook and make a home for her husband, and was scornful when she discovered that Pat could scarcely boil an egg. After a few days of quiet resentment, she lost her temper, provoking Roald to exclaim that if his mother was not kinder to his new wife, she would never see her son again. Pat and More soon patched up their differences, and when Sophie Magdalene wrote to Claudia Marsh a few weeks after they left, it was Pat's welfare and not her son's that concerned Sophie Magdalene. I do hope Roald will be nice to her. He is not easy to live with, and he is not always feeling very fit. She said she was glad that she had met us as it helped her understand him. I do hope they have a child soon. And then Roald would go on to meet Patricia Neal's family, which also did not go well. By 1955, Dahl found Patricia Neal's family boring and dull, resented her greater fame, and was frustrated by her failure to conceive. His eye wandered to other women.
It's the trifecta. It just goes on and on and on, doesn't it? I mean, was there had to have been some happy moments. I mean, he had to have had some happiness. I mean, it sounds like he had some rollicking fun.
I mean, I think he enjoyed his garden and his greyhounds and his paintings and his time spent with Charles Marsh.
Sure, sure. I mean, listen, you
Yeah.
know, when you're trying to conceive, that's fun. Like, there's some fun there, presumably.
I, yeah.
Mm, mm.
His eye wandered to other women. Well, Pat confided to her mother-in-law that she struggled to get the proper balance between giving him space and trying to make the marriage work. One night, Dahl coolly told her in bed that the marriage was over. Don't worry about it now, just go to sleep. Pat was devastated. At Charles Marsh's urging, she stayed with him. And then she went to Jamaica to stay with Charles and Claudia for a time to give themselves some space. Um, while she was in Jamaica, Charles bluntly advised her, "You can't have the balls in the family. Have one bank account and let him write the checks." Pat obeyed, and Dahl thawed at this. So, equipped with a joint bank account and a more pliant, domesticated wife, he also took steps to deal with two other things that he felt had been disturbing the marriage. First, he sent Pat to a specialist to investigate why, after 9 months of marriage, there was still no bun in the oven. And the new gynecologist diagnosed blocked fallopian tubes as the cause of her infertility and blew air through them to clean them out. Oh, so fun. Um, Second, he wrote to his family in Buckinghamshire and asked them to look for a house near the Logsdales in Great Missenden, which he and Pat could rent or preferably purchase. Despite his successes in New York, it was always Roald's intention to return to England. City life held increasingly little excitement for him, and the lure of the English countryside was once again becoming overwhelming. So slowly and insidiously, Roald began trying to persuade Pat that they should spend half the year there. Eventually, she agreed that they would spend the winters 8 months in Manhattan and the summers in England. So
How
yes,
nice, how nice, how lovely.
yeah, how lovely.
Yeah,
Now,
sure, sure.
now that
I mean,
she's
yeah,
no, no, not behaving like the breadwinner, still the
right.
breadwinner, but not
Sure,
behaving
sure,
like the
sure.
breadwinner.
And do you know, are they taking a boat back and forth or are they flying
No, I
back and
believe they're
forth?
flying.
They're flying at this point.
Yeah,
Okay. Sure,
yeah,
sure.
because they flew to Rome, so and
Sure,
they're
sure.
rich, so
Right.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Good. Wow. Hmm.
In mid-March, sorry,
When do we get to the chocolate factory?
uh,
I,
Kevin, I'm sorry to say there is a lot to get through before the chocolate
okay.
factory.
Okay. There's oh man. I want to go to the chocolate factory. When do I get the golden ticket, you know? Like it's just like oh, good Lord. Mm,
It
mm.
gets so much worse.
Abby, I'm very proud of you. You've really embraced the Art of Darkness ethos, and you're just taking all the time that you need.
I mean,
Uh,
it will be a miracle if I don't cry in the next because there's some stuff coming up that made me cry when I read it in the book, when I wrote
uh,
it out in the outline.
Abby
Yeah.
cries on the pod. Listen,
Again.
it's okay. Listen, I've choked up on the pod. I mean, I remember in the early days on the pod, you kind of you get a little emotional, you read about suicides and abortions and yeah, it can get
Yeah.
to you. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, um in in mid-March 1954, Sophie Magdalene sent her sons details of a tiny cottage that had come on the market in the outskirts of Great Missenden. It was less than an hour's train journey from London and a stone's throw from the Logsdale's house, with 6 acres of land, including an orchard filled with apple and pear trees and 2 functioning water wells. It was owned by the Stuart Liberty family, who owned Liberties in Regent Street, and had been inhabited mostly by tenant farmers and latterly by a solicitor and his young family who'd fallen on hard times. Roald and Pat went crazy about the idea of Whitefield Cottage and decided immediately that they wanted to buy it. It had cost just over £4,000. Almost 6 weeks later, they arrived in England to supervise building work on the primitive cottage and remodel, redecorate, and completely furnish it. They took many glorious walks in the Buckinghamshire countryside, and it was on one of these, after a bout of open-air sex in one of the nearby fields, where Pat had laid down on an ant's nest and got her bottom badly bitten, that Pat was convinced she finally got her bun in the oven. Above her, she remembered nature seemed to suggest omens of fertility. The bright blue sky was skirted with low-hanging clouds. It reminded her strangely of ladies removing their panties. The Wish, a short story in which a young boy left on his own in a room with a multicolored carpet persuades himself that he must cross it by only treading on its yellow portions. Okay, sorry. That was a description of a short story. The Wish was a short story in which a young boy left on his own in a room with a multicolored carpet persuades himself he must cross it by only treading on the yellow portions. If he steps on the wrong colors, he will either disappear into the black void or be killed by venomous snakes. The boy's wild imagination takes such hold of him that the reader is left uncertain of his fate when inevitably his foot does slip into the danger zone.
That is
This was
cool. I like
a short this is a
that's a
short
very cool.
story.
No, that's a very cool idea. I mean,
Yeah.
and kids can relate to that. Every kid, don't step on the ground because it's lava
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
it's
the floor is
quicksand. Yeah,
lava.
yeah. I
Okay.
definitely, growing up in the well, hang on, growing up in the '80s and the '90s, we thought that quicksand would be a much bigger problem in our
Oh,
lives.
the amount of times I thought I was going to encounter quicksand, like I've never encountered quicksand.
I don't even know where quicksand is.
Where is the
Where
quicksand?
is the quicksand? No, that's a very I'm really digging his sort of conceptual. He's getting into this almost like folkloric kind of
Yeah.
primitive, intense, primal, themes.
Yes.
It's cool.
Yeah. But I came into this paragraph confusingly. The reason I was telling you about this short story is that this is the story that led Sheila St. Lawrence, his agent, to suggest that Roald should consider writing a book for children. It was a typically sensible suggestion from the woman who was taking over as his literary rock. As the aging Anne Watkins ventured into the office less frequently, St. Lawrence gradually took over dealing with Dahl's literary affairs. Her self-reliant, practical, and inventive mind was perfectly suited to Roald's, as was her directness of expression. In the future, he would come to rely as heavily on her judgment as he had relied upon Watkins's. However, it would be a number of years before he responded to her prescient suggestion about writing for children. So,
Let me just say, this man's life up until now, the last thing that I would suggest would be write
writing for
for
children.
write. Why don't you write for children? But clearly, she had some genius. She must have
Yeah,
seen something, and incredible. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So at the time, he's written this short story. Pat's finally got a bun in the oven. Cool. The summer of 1954 saw him working on 2 new projects. A movie script of Herman McKeel's. Okay, you're gonna. Who wrote Moby Dick?
Oh, Herman Melville.
Melville. Why? No. So there's a typo here.
Oh, there's a typo in there. Okay,
Yeah.
that's okay. Yeah, yeah,
My
yeah. That's okay.
apologies. I
That's all
was like,
right.
I got very
That's okay.
confused. There was a
That's all
typo
right,
there.
Abby. Yeah,
Okay. All
you're
right.
a filmmaker.
I am
Abby's
a
a
filmmaker.
filmmaker. Okay,
Yeah. I knew
and
that was wrong.
she's
I was
not
like,
in a.
what is that? That is so
A-
confusing. Yeah,
Abby's a
there was a
filmmaker
typo.
from New Zealand. Okay, she's
Hey,
not.
we have books in New Zealand.
I-
um,
Listen,
I knew that
nobody
was
reads
wrong.
Moby.
Hold on.
Nobody reads
No,
Moby Dick.
I was reading along the line and I was like, that wasn't who wrote Moby Dick.
You're you're all right.
Anyway, typo.
You got
There
it.
was a
You're all right.
typo in my extremely long outline.